Hey guys, what's going on? Los Angeles Whip Cracking Convention is in 9 days, so I hope you all are ready. I got to sit down with my good friend Blake Bruning of the Trinity Whip Company, and we discussed a lot of stuff concerning kangaroo hide bullwhip making, because Blake Bruning specializes in that. So I'm going to shut up now and let you guys listen to how the interview went. I'm Nick Schrader, and you are listening to Whipcast. All right, guys, thank you so much for clicking play on episode 6 of Whipcast. I'm sitting alongside my good friend, whip maker and owner of the Trinity Whip Company, Mr. Blake Bruning. Good to have you, brother.
Glad to be here, Nick. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely, man. How's your Christmas?
It was cold. Yeah, it was fun,
Yeah.
Christmas is always a good time of year. Good and the bad, it's always fun.
Absolutely. Drive up here okay? Is I-65 still a giant construction site?
Surprisingly, it quit snowing the past 2 days, and we chose a good day to drive in it, so it's pretty much clear sailing. You don't have to worry about much anything other than being cold.
Yeah, 1 degree, I think. Minus 2 during the night. Well, cool, man. Where did you grow up? What did you like to do as a kid?
I grew up in Morristown, Indiana, which is about 25 minutes southeast of Indianapolis. I was born in a St. Francis hospital. I was adopted, so when I was born, I was in a kind of, it's not really an orphanage, but it's a place for the old babies, so adopted. So I think it's St. Francis, Indianapolis, but I think it's where all the Catholic girls go when they were naughty, and then they decide to let the kid go on instead of what unfortunately people do and have abortions. But so I was put up for adopted and landed up in Morristown, Indiana, under Joe and Loretta Bruning, who own a farm equipment dealership, and they also have a small farm. And I had a sister who was also adopted then too, because they just weren't able to have kids, and she was 4 years older. Her name's Stacy, and I grew up there pretty much my whole life. By the time I was 3, we were in the area, but by the time we were 3, we've been in the house I grew up my whole life in, so I didn't have to move around a lot or have different houses. It was always a stable home. And what I did as a kid, sorry, the second part on that. I would say that. I was very, what's the word for it? I was left to my own devices. They worked hard. My dad always worked hard. He'd sleep maybe 4 hours a night. He'd be up by 4:30 or 5, and he'd get home around 2:30. He'd shower, he'd sleep, get up. I mean, he'd literally live on some days 3 hours sleep and work like crazy. So she was always busy. My mom helped with the place, so I was left alone a lot. And just, when you're out we weren't like deep country, like you hear about, like, oh, they're up in the hills or they're Arkansas, but, there's nothing around. And we're talking, I'm 41 now. So when we grew up in the early to late 80s, you didn't have all the access and availability of the internet. So you either caught TV when you caught it, or you spent most of your time just trying to pass away time the way best could be. But I knew from an early age I really loved martial arts, and I watched a Bruce Lee film when I was 7. I think I was on a summer night, or maybe it was winter, I can't remember, but I was up till 2 a.m. watching it when I saw it. And then my dad woke up to do a random, in his 4 hours sleep, go ahead and take a break and go out and check on some things for an hour. And he saw me watching it. When it finished, I just went with him and fell asleep. But since then, I was always drawn to Bruce Lee and learning martial arts. And until I was 16, I started that. But I would encourage my mom to buy me ninja boots, and she's like, "Well, for Christmas, I want nunchucks." I was like, "I had 3 sectional staff. Hey, I want some throwing stars," and she kind of indulged me, but I didn't really get cultivated till I was 16. But I would say that skateboarding before that, and I just did some other things here and there in sports. I mean, I wasn't obsessed with video games, just whatever we grew up in the 80s, what you could do. But martial arts became really important at 16. By 13, it was more skateboarding, but it all kind of helped led the way to where I am today.
Yeah, so you could say you were pretty active as a child, and martial arts was kind of a big thing. Sports, you were an outdoors guy, maybe.
I really wouldn't say I was that outdoors. I've camped, but we never really camped. We just kind of sit on the farm. So like I'd go in the woods with my friends. We did some kid hunting, where they had a BB gun or we had a 22. I killed some things a few times with a friend of mine that always did it. Then after I did a couple times, like I just don't want to be about killing animals. Right. It kind of ended it for me pretty quick. But I could, we spent a lot of time outside because there really wasn't anything to do. But it's not like we had a grand thing like we're gonna go hitchhiking, or we're gonna go camping, we're gonna go kayaking. Hey, we're gonna, just like you just had to entertain yourself however you could, whether it's tying a rope to a hayloft and swinging out of the loft like Batman to, run around. I mean, whatever you could
Adventure.
do. Riding a three-wheel or anything you could find to entertain yourself was pass the time,
Awesome. So fast forward a little bit here. What made Blake Bruning decide one day, I want to start making whips? Talk a little bit about that.
I got into whips, I would say, almost 10 years ago. And that as far as just cracking whips and knowing I could crack whips, because I had no idea you could crack a whip. You grew up loving, I will say that, Indiana Jones is a huge influence as a kid as far as loving, the Raiders and the Temple of Doom. Crusade came out when I was like 13. I saw that in theaters. But, you just never think about it. And I think that's why whip cracking isn't really popular, because there's nowhere anyone sees it in a media to where it makes it sound like something you could do and is easy to do, and you could just grab a whip from anywhere and do it.
Right.
It's not very much access or availability. And so I don't think it dawns on people to crack whips. So anything else you see it like, well, that's in a movie. Of course, Indiana Jones has a whip, but you never really think much about it. And then I went to Disney Studios as a kid once. My parents, the only vacation I ever had, where I actually went to a park besides King Island like once. So we went there, and I went to the show, and then I wanted to come back with a hat when I was a kid, and they didn't let me. So just really quick to say, when I was an adult, I went there and I said, hey kids, we're here. I'm not going to say a word. You pick any souvenir hat you want, but I'm coming back with that Indiana Jones hat. And so I came back to it, and I teach martial arts to kids, and so we were going to have a Halloween party that I had regularly. So I thought, well, I got a leather coat, and I got a hat. I'm like, let's just get a whip. So I got on YouTube and found an Adam Winrich video of, hello, I am Adam Winrich, and here's how you crack a whip or a bullwhip. And then he goes through all his spiel, and I thought, oh, I can do that. And so I didn't have a Facebook account then, so I had my wife contact him, or through him, I contacted him through a messenger and asked what I should get, and he recommended a couple things. And then that kind of got me into it for about 6 years. And then that 6 years, I had maybe 200 whips pass through my hands. And I know it sounds like a lot, but it's not like I bought 200. I have what I call a floater whip. I encourage people that if you're getting into whip cracking, and it can be an expensive hobby, find people near you, find people around you. It's good to see other people's stuff that they have to get a better understanding before you even spend $1. But if you are alone, you can't do it, and you finally save up for a big purchase whip and you love it, that's great. And if you want a second, I say have about a $300 fund and then buy a whip with it, but don't plan on keeping it. Just buy a whip of a different length, because you never had a different length. And then if you love it, trade out the one you have. If not, you sell it. Maybe you make $20, maybe you lose $20, but it's the price of renting a whip, and now you try a new whip. So for about 6 years, I went through about 200 whips, and my third whip was a Joe Strain 8-foot. Raiders and 12 ply, and that to me, even after I went through my 200 whips, I always came back to thinking that just whatever it was about Joe Strain felt alive or great in my hand. And not that I didn't try a lot of other great whip makers, and there's not good things, but it just, Joe Strain stuff always seemed for me to be just exactly what a whip should be like. And when I found out he was retiring, and I want to say it was 2013, I found out he was retiring, in 14, or he's trying to, and I realized at that point, I'm like, if I can't get another Joe Strain whip, what am I going to do? Now, I know there's plenty of other whip makers, but that kind of made me freeze. And then, at the same time, other things were working, where Steve Townsend was a whip maker, was pretty new at this time. He was probably on like his 8th whip or so. When I found out he lived near me and was making them from Club Obi-Wan, I found him. And then after talking to him, and I said, hey, can I shadow you? And so he let me come over, and after he showed me some basics, I went, after about 6 hours just getting a core, a belly, braided, and a first bolster. I went home and spent another 12 hours not sleeping until I made that whip the next morning at like 10 a.m.
Wow,
and I finally got some sleep, but after that I was pretty much hooked. And I did have a whip kit probably maybe after 4 years of cracking whips or 3, I bought a whip kit, like a really cheap one off eBay. I mean, I did make a whip then, but after I made it, I'm like, I'll never be a whip maker. I don't ever want to be a whip maker.
Yeah, we all say that, don't we? The first time.
Whip maker's worth their weight in gold, and I never want to ever have to deal with this experience again.
Right.
And, but my hat goes out to all those people that do learn from YouTube, or just decide from seeing a movie, I'm going to find out how to make one. I don't think I could have done it that way. What made me really be who I was Steve Townsend of Townsend Handcrafted Whips let me into his house and actually getting to see the problems that I couldn't understand on my own brain. Like, how do I continue the whole overlay around one skin, or how do I lash it to a handle? But that little few hours he gave me, launched it. And so I'm very thankful and beholden to Steve Townsend for opening his house and family me. But once that happened, I just took off, man.
Absolutely, that's great. So about 4 years, you would say, before you got into whips, you experienced 200 some whips. You got to see how they were made. And to have that experience before you go into making a whip, I'm sure that helped you so much.
It kind of did. I would say that it was more of a wasted experience compared to if I knew I was making, because to see those 200 but to never see a whip, because I could only judge what I think the average whip cracker can is when I have a whip in my hand. I can only really, I don't, people don't really look at their whip. I mean, they'll eyeball it, but they don't really see where's the plats, where's the drops, where's the consistency, where's the taper of it. Like, they just crack a whip and it either feels good or it don't. It's like putting on a shoe. I like this shoe, I don't like that one. And so those 200 whips, I was just trying to find out what shoes felt good. And it turned out to be Joe Strand, and there's some other good guys I found, but Joe always seemed to be the best fit for me. And the problem is, after that process, when I finally started getting the whipmaker's eye by trying to make a whip, I realized I could have had a huge education if I would have spent those first 6 years with all these whips actually looking at these whips and taking dimensions or recognizing how they were shaped. So it did help in ways, but it would have been a lot better if I would have known from the start, I might make a whip one day, and let's take all these pictures and these dimensions of all these 200 whips. And so.
Of course, now you have that whipmaker's eye, so you can see those details that you might not
a lot better.
Have been able to see.
You can only see so much from a picture, but you can see a lot from it too. I wouldn't have been able to see anything at that point. Like, I couldn't even know how to tell it was a 12 plat. There's a 12 plat. What's it in on? 8, 12? How do I count? 6? How do I do it? It's just, it doesn't take a lot to know about it. But, if you don't know, you don't know. So you can't see it, and then once it's pointed out, then it's painfully obvious.
Now, what parts or part of the whip making process would you say was the most challenging for you when you were starting? Like, what was there something that frustrated you the most? That was the toughest learning curve? I can tell you mine right now, knots.
Well, first of all, just before I forget, I've only been making whips for 4 years, and actually this will be the 4th year today, or yesterday is the 4th year on the dot. It was between Christmas and New Year's, and I think it was a Tuesday. And I finished that Wednesday morning at Steve's exactly 4 years ago. And it's not a long time in making whips. There's a few other, that are like that are pretty well known, like Peter Thorndike. I think he's 4 to 5 years, which is phenomenal, and how good he is in a short time. So I've been very blessed with these 4 years. And as far as what was the most frustrating is, I think a lot of things, when you come to master things eventually as time goes by, when you see something as a noob, it's not the same as a mastered person. But when I first started seeing how whipmaking was done, and I originally had that kit, just having that kit to put together, I started thinking that all the hard stuff was, braiding is hard. Putting these knots on is hard. And I'm like, wow, there's no, whip making sucks. It's like, who would ever torture themselves with this process? And then, so when I went into it, I was thinking, oh, that hard stuff, man, I don't want to do that hard stuff, the braiding and the knot making. And I said, I'm going to try it. And then I found out that all the things that I thought were hard were actually very easy. And then the ones that I thought would be easy were actually the very difficult thing, like getting it cut and stretch and prepping and lashing right, and getting it so it all fits around what you're going to braid. And that braiding's really the easy work, because you'll get a guy every now and again be like, hey, I want you to make a whip kit. You sell an 8-foot for 500, let's say it's 550, like 550. How much you want for an 8-foot whip kit? They're thinking like, $100, I bet. And I'm like, well, the material alone could be could be 150 to 2, depending on what all I paid for it and I gave it to you. So it's like, 2 to 50. Let's just say 250. It's like with shipping it to you too. It's 250. So it's like, so now and then I'm like, well, now I did all the hard work. I cut it, I stretched it, I prepped it. It's ready to braid. I mean, all you gotta do is braid, and I made you the knots. It's like, so for like 450, I'll give you the whip kit. Like, I'm not saving any money. I'm like, I'm doing all the hard work. What you think, which I thought was the hard work was braiding, is actually the easiest work that you can sit back and get in a rhythm. Everything else takes a lot more preparation and time and effort. It's not as effort. It doesn't take as much effort when you're better at it and you've been seasoned, but that's still the most important part, is all the prep work. Yeah, that is absolutely a huge part of it. Yeah, as a nylon whip maker, preparation is not nearly as big as a part as a leather whip maker. I mean, we're talking a whole kangaroo skin that you have to cut each individual strand. It would be hard if you had to cut your nylon lace. Oh man, weave your own. Even if it's all one length, this is the fact that you had to make your lace. Like, I got to make my nylon today. We're gonna spend all day making nylon. Right. Well, Blake, you're a very innovative craftsman. I feel like a lot of whip makers kind of stick to just the basics of, here's a handle, here's the whip. It's a plated handle, plated thong, But I really like what you're doing with your Paladin and your Saber whip line. I've never seen it before done, and talk a little bit about those. What are those? Okay. I would say that, well, first of all, before we get any deeper, I just want to say that, I'm a huge fan of Jesus Christ. And with that being said, I give all credit to just, God's blessing and Christ's anointing and just all the people that got me here to this point as well. Family as well as, other people in my life that are good influences or help me out along my way. But with my whip making career, Joe Strain once said, you got to make the whips that people want so you can make the ones you want. And so you tend to make, a whip maker that does Kangaroo tends to make a lot of Indiana Jones whips. And I've been pretty fortunate that I'm about to make my 500th whip.
Congratulations.
And I was going to do it as a, thank you.
Yeah.
I was going to do it as a crowning point this week. But out of those 500, I would say that I've only made about 150 Raiders, which has been phenomenal for me. While sometimes if you have seen my collection, it is very, very unique and abstract. And I've got a lot of different, as you said, series and crazier stuff. And it's been a blessing and a curse, but I'd say it's I've been very fortunate that I've used what I've done to, when I don't have orders, to try to create or invent things that I've never seen that I just wanted to be made. And some of these came my way in different ways, but I've been very fortunate on also having a lot of customers that want something a little more wild, a little bit more off the cuff than just a simple Raider, and all that's helped me to really explore and spread rings. The Saber Whip was actually what got me to making lightsaber whips. Well, first of all, I've always loved Star Wars, and I've read probably 100 audiobooks of the stories. I mean, who isn't a Star Wars fan? Maybe you Trekkies out there, but there's
is there conflict between?
But I think there is. There's movies on that stuff. Trekkies versus Trekkers of the Trek, or Star Wars versus. But Trek's cool too. But I've always been a Star Wars fan, and then I was visiting Adam Winrich, and he was talking about making that they make these lightsabers, and that you could easily maybe stick a whip in there, kind of like a cow whip. He's never done it, but he said he told me when I was videoing, he's like, man, I'm surprised you haven't. He's like, I'm surprised no one's done it. He said, I'm surprised you haven't done this, Blake. I mean, knowing who you are, because I made a lot of these crazy theme whips within my first 60. I got to get these. Had Bernie make me these pharaohs like Autobots logo or Thundercats or GI Joe, and I'd make these classic. I was going to call them like the vintage classic cartoon themed whips, or something like that, But when he suggested doing that, I started getting into figuring out how to make a saber whip and how to make a custom plastic piece to make it work where I want. But it was Adam that kind of led me into that thinking. And then within like 2 weeks, I started buying sabers to get to know them better. I started trying to figure out ways to put it together until I customized that. And the sword handle whip kind of came from an idea to me when I was talking to a guy briefly, a movie producer. He was talking about this Western he was wanting to make one time, or he's planning on making it. And I'm not really going to talk too much about it. Not that I'm involved with the movie. But when I was thinking about it, I'm like, what would be an awesome whip for a Western? And I was thinking, man, I want to see a nice D-guard like a Civil War. Like, that'd be an awesome thing no one's done. And so to actually get a handle with a D-guard like somebody would be in the West or Civil War time, but have a whip on it as his weapon. And so that kind of got me thinking about it. And then I know somebody probably has took an old broken down sword and like removed the blade and tried to attach a whip to it before. But these are actually, I'm using Joe Henry. So shout out to Joe Henry from Stonehill Armory. And he's actually making these custom sword handles with the spike I want that I normally would braid on kind of sticking out of the handle. So it's got a hidden tang basically. So it is a steel spike with a tang that has a sword handle on it, and then I just braid over it kind of like a nail, but it's got its own obstacles. So
very cool.
But I haven't seen one do that yet, where they made a whole series of a complete custom craft, as opposed to, hey, I found this at a flea market, and let's see if we can put a whip on it.
Yeah, I really like that because because it's a handle of a sword, it sort of not forces you, but it really encourages you to have the whip roll out the same every time.
Yeah, finding the line on the, I believe they call it profiling, or the indexing on the handle. Yeah, it does. Yeah. It is good to have that. I think that could help people.
Yeah. So you've got a page on your website called the Mystery Whip Ordering page. I think that's really cool. What is that? What do we got going on?
I have 3 daughters. One's about to be 14 in like 4 days, and then I've got another one that's 9, and then I've got another one that's 3. And they love watching this thing called Cookies for C on YouTube, where she gets all these like Shopkins or LOL dolls, or they get all these gifts, and this girl basically has millions and millions of viewers and makes her living of just people send her stuff to open, for her YouTube channel. And I was just marveled at how they would watch her unwrap all these toys. And I'm like, wouldn't you want your own toy? And they're like, well, it's almost the same. Recently, I finally started getting it. What I got is they just like the idea of the surprise of what's in there. It's like they don't. They're with her watching it. To them, they are opening it with her. And so they enjoy that mystery of what's going to come out of that pack.
Yeah.
And then, I went ahead and made this mystery whip gag because I realized some people, a lot of people won't agree with it, but they're like, I think some people could like the idea of kind of having a mystery. And because it's that whole thing, like, I don't know what I'm going to get, but I know it's going to be a good whip by a good maker I like. I can't wait to see what it is. And, I can see a lot of people being like, well, if I'm going to spend, 300 or 500, I want to know exactly what I'm getting. And I see that, but I haven't made, I have 3 tiers. Each one has 30 whips, but I haven't made these 90 whips, people. Like they're set up that I went ahead and cast lots, like in this tier 1, which is the cheap one for 300. Like I have like I think 15 of them are only 4-footers, which I usually sell for 325. So no matter what, you're getting more. You're getting a value, because if you bought what you did want, it would cost more. So I'm cheaping them up for the whole. You get a mystery of it, and then I kind of set up different things. Like, even though a 4-foot's only 300, well, I also have in there several 6 feet you can buy. So when you get a mystery whip, I have 30 different lots already set up what it could be, and then I'm going to roll a dice when someone buys it, and then whatever number it is, wherever it lands on, that's what I make. Now, if it's an indie style, like it's a Temple of Doom, well, it's automatically saddle tan. You can't choose it, and you won't hear from me until you get your whip, or I might talk to you about it. But there's another 15 where you won't know what they are, but I can say, hey, do you want a 1-tone? Do you want a 2-tone? You can have some creative liability on it.
Yeah.
And so you don't know what you're getting, but I'll let you pick the colors. It's just that there are a little too many indies. Maybe it doesn't pick up. I'll take out some of the indies, and so no matter what, I'll just double up the options, but you can pick the collar. But I figure you got all these people where they're like, oh, I don't want to spend a lot on a whip, and I like a big whip, but I don't know, 400 to 5's a lot for a 6-foot. And I'm like, well, now I've got a mystery whip, so $300, you're guaranteed a 4-foot, which you at least would buy. But you could get all the way up to a 6-foot stock whip, or a 6-foot bull whip, or it's like there's almost 10, there's like 15 out of there that's a 5-foot or a 6-foot where you're getting even more your value. You just got to roll a dice and see. And just because my daughter's crazy that mystery of the LOL dollar, the Shopkin mystery pack, I was just like, what? I haven't seen this. I think that'd be a novel idea, because there got to be somebody being like, I got $300. I would love to maybe get a 6-foot. I'm happy with the 4. Let's just see what happens.
Exactly.
Let's pay for it and get it. And and I also offer 100% satisfaction guarantee, and I extend it on the mystery whip. So like, if they get it and they actually just don't love the whip, I don't mind. They can send it back, and we'll figure out the next thing.
Right. Yeah, I've actually experienced quite often times I'll have a customer who's interested in a whip. They'll get ready to put in an order, and they'll just kind of tell me, do whatever you want, which is kind of surprising to me, because like you said, if somebody's getting ready to, to spend a certain amount of money on a whip, sometimes a significant amount, especially for a first whip, to have them just kind of say, I trust you, man. Do what you want.
That's where I thought it might be appealing too. After I just had this brainchild where I thought, this is something I got to make. But afterwards, I was thinking, you're right. There's a lot of rookies that they're like, well, I want a whip, and I haven't bought a whip before. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, what do you want? It's like, well, I was hoping you'd help me with that. I'm like, well, I don't know you. I don't know.
Right.
It's like, you've got to tell me more what your goals are. Maybe I can help you, or find the right whip maker if it's not me. And I've done that a lot. But this is where this could be helpful too. They're like, well, I don't know what I want. I don't even know what colors I want to pick.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's like, well, you just put $300 in, you're going to get a good whip. Might be a snake whip, might be a stock whip, might be a bull whip. You don't know, you don't care. It's a starter whip for $300. You now get a raffle.
I think it's a good idea to encourage that. Just kind of say, people aren't sure. Yeah. They want to experiment. They see your work. Make me a whip, whatever you think. Yeah. Let's talk about 2016. You visited Joe Strain, who is your biggest influence.
Definitely.
Yeah, I've seen his work. I can definitely see why. Talk a little bit about that experience. How did you go about doing that? What whips did you work on with him? What techniques did you go over during your visit with Joe?
Well, Joe, like I said, I knew Joe was retiring around 13 or 2014. I knew it was coming up, and so it's like I said, it was about a little over 4 years ago. So about 4.5 years ago when I found that out. I had a pretty good relationship with him. Joe always impressed me on how humble and down to earth and open he is. I mean, you could just give him a call. You give him a call and he'd talk to you, and he'd answer all the questions, no matter how numbskull I might have sounded 10 years ago on my first questions. He was really great with it. And I've talked to a lot of people since then. Like even Todd Rex says, he said, I just called Joe to have fun talking to him. He's just a great guy. And so that always also appealed me to Joe, was the interesting correlation of just how great his work is, and that he's that great of a human being. And I almost think it goes hand in hand. Like, normally you can't have high skill without high character. It can happen. There are people with low character with high skill, but generally to have that high of a skill he had, you had to have a high character, which I mean is being down to earth and cool, and not like thinking, oh, I'm the greatest whip maker, because he never called himself the greatest whip maker. I'll call him that, in my opinion, the greatest American whip maker, although that's debatable, of course, easy in ways. But I always loved his work. I bought a lot off of him. I talked to him regularly about him. We were making it, and then when I started getting into it, and I started finding out about Steve before I even started learning. I got to learn the basics from Steve on that fateful day. I was talking to Joe about it and talking to Steve, and I was getting emails from Joe to Steve about construction. So that also kind of helped too. But once I started getting into it, I just started talking to Joe like crazy, and he was always open and forthcoming and answered all my questions. And I would say what really helped me out was getting a lot of those early guidelines from him, which I call, it's like, Pirates of the Caribbean. When it comes to whip making, it's not so much rules, but, when it comes to master, it's more like those guidelines. It's more the guidelines, we call it. But then, so I got to talk to him for a while. He's been retired. He was more like semi-retired, but he basically is retired. I mean, he'll put something on his in stock every now and again. He finally finished a lot of oars. I don't know if he'll take another movie deal. He might took a movie deal in these past years, but he is basically retired, and he'll still pop some stuff out on his free time, I think, when he can. Yeah. But when talking to him about it too, and about his, how he has retired, or he's about to be officially retired, on 16, he said, "I'm finally. I know I said this, but I'm." He's like, "I'm knocking it all off." I said, "Well, I'd love to be able to visit you and to be up for it." He's like, "Yeah, man, for you." He'd be like, "That'd be for sure." So we talked about it, and I was thinking, man, I may only get this one chance to see Joe because he's out, he's retiring. Time's moving by. I'm like, what would I want to do? And being an American whip maker, bull whips is your mainstay. And I'll never make a signal whip, although I've helped make some signal whips for people. I don't make signal whips. I only make snake whips and bull whips and variations like target whips and etc. And I always want to make a stock whip. I kind of call that the trinity of whips: is snake, stock, or bull. And so I made my first stock whip. I was talking to Peter Thorndike a lot, and I told him, "Hey, I want to make one. Can you help me with it?" So he just showed me his original notes from what he took from his whip maker and gave me all the specs for how he'd make a 6'8" platen. So I kind of did it his way. And then I started making a second one and then I was about to see Joe, and I'm like, what could I do with Joe? Like, of course I want to see him make a Raiders. I mean, it's Joe. To get him making a Raiders and to film it would be phenomenal. And I was trying to be honest with myself where I need. I'm like, I need to know how to make two things. And I want to know, well, I need to know how to make a stock whip. Above all, that's my biggest Achilles heel. I want to know how to make a stock whip. And I said, well, we're there, might as well make a match set. That way I can also take away how he matches things or matches stock whips and make them. And so we went there with that in mind. I spent about 2 days there, and I GoPro'd the whole thing. He was even kind enough to put a GoPro on his chest while he braided the thong, and that was really cool to watch it, to see how the hands are moving and pulling and rooting through things on a nice view like that. But I spent a couple days with him before I flew back, and it was just the experience was great. I mean, his family and his kids they're just amazing. Everything about them just really awesome, and it was a huge blessing to me. And I feel Christ gave me a blessing with Joe from the beginning, and even before then, he always kind of gave me favor where Joe just kind of liked me a lot, and we just hit it off pretty well. And so when I started getting into it, and I could make that visit. I just got to keep giving favors. Just Christ opened that door for me, or giving me a favor with him. And then when I came back, I made like 10 stock whips right off the bat. I'm like, all right, I just got this. I'm putting everything on
mind and overload
until I fix these details real quick, because if you see it and then you don't do anything with it for 2 days, you're going to lose a lot. So I reviewed all the footage on my 7-hour flight back. I got home and I woke up and did it again. I grabbed height and just started cutting to make sure I ingrained all I could. And my goal is that I'll get it. I'm going to see him one more time this year. Coming up in is it 2018 coming up? I'm going to visit one more time, and I'm going to have him show me how to make a few things. But the main one is we're going to make an 8-foot Raiders, and I'm going to grill Joe on every inch of that whip and what he would normally do compared to all the indie versions or other versions. And I'm just going to drill in all these questions so that I can have that kind of saved on a file and have it available to research and maybe help others with someday when they ask questions about it.
Yeah, that is some valuable information for sure. It's so important. It's so refreshing to find somebody that is so influential to you, and they turn out to just be a down-to-earth person, and they're willing to help you out. That's just... that's priceless.
Like the old adage, don't meet your heroes. Right. It works out this time.
Yeah. And I would say, Blake, the way that you feel about Joe, I feel that way about you, man. You've helped me so much with leather whip making in the past.
Oh, thank you.
I've learned a lot.
I've done very little, people, very little.
I would say 90% of what I know.
Guy.
But yeah, man, you've been a huge help to me, and I appreciate it, man. All right, we've got a few Facebook questions for you, Blake. One of them, hey guys, this one is from Samuel. Hey guys, how do you know when you're ready to try making a kangaroo hide whip? Sounds like obviously he started with nylon. Would you need practice with cowhide whips first?
Well, I would say personally, what I did is I just jumped into Kangaroo and I never looked back. I did make one cowhide, and actually I ran into a goat hide recently that I got kind of given me by a local leather shop. So I'm going to make a goat whip and send it to them. But I would say if you know you want to be about Kangaroo hide, I would just leave out cow altogether. But that's my opinion. I guess where I originally heard that, which I was already on that path because I kind of knew that, but Paul Nolan said at the Townsend once, he's just like, Steve was just like, I want to make Kangaroo. Should I make cow first? And I'd say the same thing Paul told him. I would. He's just like, you want to be about Kangaroo, then just buy Kangaroo and don't even worry about the cow. Mm-hmm. And I kind of agree with that. I know when it comes to Kangaroo, the biggest problem you guys have concerns about is you're like, it's so expensive. Right. And you just see that I'm going to wreck this Kangaroo, and now I'm out $80 to $120 or give or take, whatever it is, depending on what you paid. And it's just going to be crap. And it's just like, I won't be able to cut it right, or it's, I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm like, well, you do that. First of all, if you did a cow, you're probably going to have the same problems with the cow as the Kangaroo. So it could be a pro for you to do cow. You could say, well, I learned on sheep or hide first. But cow and Kangaroo do not stretch or act the same. Like cowhide is weird. Cowhide, first of all, not only stretches, like when you cut out a strip of Kangaroo like a lace and then you stretch it. Well, when you pull on it, let's just say, it's like north and south. Well, it shrinks east and west, right? And so cowhide does that too, but a lot of cowhide, I can actually re-stretch it back out east and west. And, and then you'll find that out when you're doing bolster material if you're using cow or kip. It does that stuff, and it's a little nutty. But also, the only other problem with cow, from what I've always noticed, is that even though I stretch it and it shrinks east and west, it also shrinks in thickness. So it'll also pull it, like parts of it will be fatter and thicker now. Like you almost had a really bad splitter accident where only random spots got split. And so you're going to be dealing with that frustration too. Cow's kind of weird like that. Kangaroo has a stronger tensile strength, but and it is more valuable for different reasons because it does cost a little bit more, and in my opinion, pound for pound, it is better leather. But I would say just dive into the Kangaroo. The other, some of the other problems I had with cow when I did it is, cow can be up to like 9 feet long. All right, now. That's more than 9 9 DM or 90 DM. I'm not talking about 90 DM. I'm talking it is 9 feet long by like 4 feet tall, sometimes
right, the whole
or more.
Side.
So you got to have like an 8-foot table to drop that bad boy on, and then then I've got to run around the table when I did it. Like I had to slide my knife in there and just run around laps around the table to cut it out, as opposed to trying to take 9 feet of skin and spin it like a pizza pie while I'm cutting it, like you kind of can with a Kangaroo.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's even more difficult to cut it out. Not that you can't. I'm just saying you kind of have to move around the hide instead of just let the hide move around you. And a lot of people do ask about when you're ready for roo. And I would just say, if you feeling like you want to make a roo, make a roo. If you're already a nylon whip maker, it won't hurt you to make a roo. Even if you only make one roo, maybe you'll learn that this is why you love nylon and you don't want to deal with that headache. Or maybe you'll learn you'll love to do both. Or maybe you'll learn roo's where it's at and you don't want nylon. But the thing is, if you never try it, you'll never get any better at it. So if you don't jump in the water, you don't know you can swim, and you might as well just jump in and go full tilt, if you ask me. So I would just buy a Kangaroo. First of all, do some research, watch some videos, contact some what you'd call known or reputable whip makers. Find one that is just very personable and is glad to help and talk to you. And even then, don't stop. Ask around a little bit. Find out what all you can to be as ready as you can, but then have fun. Buy a Kangaroo. In the worst case scenario, what's his name again we're talking to?
This is Samuel.
Samuel, worst case scenario, let's just say you had that skin and you made that whip and it just caught fire and burnt to the ground right there after you're finished. You're only out about $90 and you maybe started a whole lifelong love and career. So you know what? Just let it burn. And as far as making, and I'll just touch on this too, since you're talking about making your first Kangaroo whip. When I got into this, I kind of had an understanding that no matter what, I will not be making a great first whip. And no matter what, the first 10 whips, you're going to have a lot of learning curves. Now, maybe you think you've learned some of these curves in nylon. It is a little different leather. You got to relearn them kind of still because there's different variables. But those first 10, you should look at them as you're a painter and you've got 10 canvases, and I'm going to try to paint the best picture I can on each canvas. Because when you make that first one, it's very easy to be like, well, I'm going to unbraid that, and then I'm going to retrim that, or I'm going to unbraid this now, and retrim it, and you'll rebraid one whip 5 times. And I can see how people do that, and I've never done that. I've rebraided a whip maybe The most was twice or 3 times in my first 50. I had a whip that's causing problems, and I had to unbraid it and rebraid it because it wasn't working out. So I had to just take the overlay off and drop it, make a new overlay because I was still trying to figure certain things out. And then I remade a whip with it. But other than that, I made a whip. It's got its problems. It's got its flaws. But when I was done, and I moved on to my new canvas. So instead of wasting time scraping off all the paint and bleaching the canvas, I would just buy a new canvas and think about those first 10 as learning lessons and be like, I'm going to buy 10 canvases and we'll see how awesome I can be by that 10th one. And don't worry about being judged on it or condemnation about how bad you are on that first one. It's your first one, but don't worry about also when it is done and it does look bad saying it's done, and then start fresh with those lessons learned, instead of trying to rebraid a crappy whip 5 times for it to still be just slightly less crappy. Move on to a new canvas and feel free and fresh again, instead of just shackled to this thing that ain't even working right out for you.
You're getting,
and if you can expect to give away those first 10 as gifts or presents, or if you can at most, it'd be awesome just to get your money out or as close to your money, considering an internship.
That's a good way to look at it. Absolutely. Here is a question from Sean. Are Rawhide whips fully Rawhide, including bellies, or is it just the overlay? That's a good question.
I would say it depends on the maker. I of course use on a normal full size whip. I use, as far as a bull whip, I use a double kangaroo belly whip, and then I use kip or cowhide. I tend to have kip on hand more than not that I'll use for the core. And if I don't use kip for the core, I'll use some cowhide very similar to kip because, it's still cow. And then I would use that for the bolsters. So I'd have a first and second bolster out of cow. Usually my core is kip. Whether it's cow or kip or kangaroo, I would say that part doesn't matter as far as bolsters or cores. Some people like Bernie would use all kangaroo. And I asked him about that one time. I can't remember his response, but I was just like, is kangaroo just cheaper than cow? He's like, no, it's just all about the same price. I just think he just preferred it, or he just didn't have to worry about trying to outsource cow. So he's like, I got kangaroo, I'll make it work. Plus, he gets a little cheaper in Australia than I think we do. But, there's other people that I don't really want to drop names. It's an insult to them, but just in case they would take it this way, which I'm not. There are some people that will make, maybe not all their whips like this, but especially whips where they won't even use a belly. They'll use like fattened cores and then an overlay. So in there, if it was a kangaroo, I don't know if too many people do a kangaroo. I know like Todd's Costume Whip does that, but they were selling like $120. They used to sell kangaroo, an overlay, but they, of course, they're selling $120 10-foot kangaroo whip. So, the lace is pre-cut lace probably or something, but they would drop it on it and it wouldn't really have kangaroo bellies. And there's some other people that do stuff like, I think Terry Jack, he was a post-depression whip maker. He learned from it to post-depression. So he would have, I've seen before where he would have just one good belly or kangaroo, but then he'd have layers of bolstered material. Like it might even be like upholstery kangaroo that he would bind layers to give it taper and then an overlay. There's also other people I know that have done stuff like an all bolstered core. I think if you're paying what I call full price, like a David Morgan price, a Paul Nolan price, I guess me, or Casey, or Joe Strain, then when you're paying, about that $700 for a 10-foot whip, I think you have a right to expect that it would have a kangaroo for the bellies and, kangaroo for the overlay. It'd be an all kangaroo whip. Finding cowhide in there is not surprising for bolsters or core because cowhide, although everything can be cut to the similar thickness, cowhide is more supple and will go into the creases of the underlayers and create a fresher canvas than I think kangaroo does. Kangaroo can do that. But if you just touch kip or, especially kip, you'll just see how it would just smash into the grooves, creating a fresh canvas for each layer. And I think that's one reason why it's done over here a lot more. I think it's done like that in a lot of Australia too. Like they don't put kangaroo for every layer, but some people do. It's like there are no rules to whip making, people. It's more like guidelines,
Exactly.
So, but I if you're paying top dollar, I would be appalled if I spent $550 on like a 6 to an 8 foot whip, and I found out that there was nothing in there but a kangaroo overlay and a bunch of random upholstery, leather bound up inside. I would be appalled. I'd be like, you should give me $200 or $300 back,
Yeah.
So they should be like that. But that's good questions. You should always ask your whip maker what they do. If a whip maker is kind of hesitant to say what they do, I call that a whip maker's red flag right there. If they're not open and honest about what they do, and they're not coming genuine, and they don't explain the bad with the good, or you can tell they're being honest, they kind of dodge questions that are about how they make something. I'd say you might want to find a new whip maker.
Yeah, that's the most important part in my opinion. I mean, use what you're going to use. Definitely some materials are better than others, no doubt about that, but the transparency with you and your customers, I think that's what's most important.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, customer relationship is one of the things that I feel I've always been able to soar with, but I've been teaching martial arts like 24 years, so I've kind of been that, the guy in charge, and also the coach, and then the friend, and then the mentor to the little kids. So it's like I've kind of always been in those situations where I'm in those roles. Like customer service, like always being there to encourage people, make them feel good about themselves was huge for me as a teacher. So
yeah.
when I get a deal with people, they call me, I'll talk to them. I have customers that call and talk to me for an hour, and I'll just talk about nothing about whips. I don't care. And when they do have whips, and they're always saying, I need help with this, or I'm looking at this, and they'll send me videos. And I love, like I said, that teacher in me comes in well where I just treat them like they're how I'd want to be treated, like they're my best friends. So
right.
That customer service of just always encouraging them, making them feel good about themselves, making them happy to do what they're doing, always being there at any time somebody contacts me, I get back to them as soon as possible to help them out with information like that. That's what helped transcend over from all that teaching, is just being able to do that for people. And I think that's my biggest advantage to being who I am as a whip maker, is that customer service relationship with people. Because ultimately, I think that's a huge part of being successful, is they want a guy that they when they buy a whip from me or any whip maker, they call whip makers, and then they talk to whip makers, and then they want to find a connection, because they're about to put maybe $700 a lot for me just to drop on a hat. And not that some people it's not so much, some people it is. So when you to me, if I was to put $700 in a whip maker, I want to know and have talked to that guy, and I'd like to know what he kind of feels like as far as character and attitude and spirit, because I'm about to entrust that with him, and then I get his product. So it is good to have a relationship with that whip maker and feel the confidence and trust.
Yeah.
And so that was always big for me when I met Joe, and it's big for me now when I talk to people. I get back with them, and I just try to be as available, and I even try to send people in another direction, like, you don't know what you want, let's talk about it. And then they start telling me, and I start giving them suggestions on other whip makers. Sometimes they buy from me and sometimes they don't, but I am not trying to make a sale. I'm trying to find that person, to find that first whip, because when they get their first whip, that's their chance to be influenced for the rest of their life based on that experience with that first whip. And I want them to find the perfect one so we can grow this community of whip cracking.
Yeah. Here's a question from Andy. Yo, Nick, it's cool having Blake in the podcast. Got a couple questions. Number one, when making the heel and transition knot, do you staple and then wrap it with artificial sinew, or the other way around? I think you do your transition knots a lot differently than I do with nylon whips. What's your process with those?
It depends.
Yeah.
I would say generally, if it's just a cut and standard mix, as far as a transition knot, I just generally wrap a bunch of sinew around, and to where it's thick enough or wide enough that I need, so it'll create that lip and will give the borders for the transition knot to lay on it. Sometimes I have to work on things where, like, I don't know if you've ever seen a young indie whip, but where like Paul's known for making that whip, but I've made a couple of those where, you have like a red handle and then you have like a black whip. And there are ways to do it to where it would be more, maybe a little bit better structurally sound, but generally when you make that whip, you would braid the whip and then lash down where you want to take the black off the handle. And then you'd lash down strong for like maybe 1/4 of an inch. And if you did something like that, and then you braided the handle up to it and then lash that down, you'd have about 1/2 inch. So when I would load that, I would make sure those are lashed, and then I would overlash. But then I might take a thin piece of leather around those connecting areas, because it is a little wider, and I want to get that to be, clear or flush. And then I would put sinew around that, but not much, as I put a knot. So like there are cases on certain whips like that where maybe I wouldn't just stick to the all sinew foundation for some of the transition knots. As far as heel knots, once again, there are, I don't know, there's probably about 3 or 4 main ways I will put my knot foundation together before I put my knots on it, depending on the whip I'm making. Like a stock whip handle, yeah, I'm more likely to, once I get the handle braid on there and lash, to put a cap on it. In other words, I wouldn't make a cross piece like you guys can normally see. I would get a round piece and slap it on there, and then I would staple it and then drop it like a cross and staple it and staple the corners, and then I trim off the excess, as opposed to trying to make a weird cross shape to fit.
Yeah,
I have a circle lay on it and staple it down like you would if it was a cross, but then when you fold it, you just cut those gaps and make it work.
Right.
So I might do that on a stock whip. I might do that on some other whips if it's just a called for it. Otherwise, I'll put lead flashing sometimes on them. They want a lighter weight, or depending on the whip, I won't want to put any lead weight on it. I won't put, like an Indy, I tend to use about 3 wraps of lead. That I also have the lead, even though it's one piece that's wrapped 3 times, I also taper that. So like I might do that on an Indy, while another whip, I wouldn't want 3 lashes. It's going to make too bulbous of a handle. So maybe I would put 1 lap or 2 laps of lead. And then, I would also use the cap or sometimes the yoke to shape the foundation. So unfortunately, I can't give you a clear-cut, walkthrough on how I would handle it, because it kind of depends on whether it is a target whip or I'm trying to hit certain width parameters on a whip. So I've got to make, like on the record maker, the one that, it's just a whip that makes the Guinness Book of World Records standards. Like I can't have the heel knots or transition knots. They have to be 3/4 of an inch or give or take an 1/8 of an inch. So I can't have a heel knot that is past 1 inch and 1/8. So when you get stuck with stuff like that, it's like I couldn't do a normal, whatever someone might do, like I wrap 2 pieces of lead and then I put a cap on it and then I sinew it. But whatever I do for the foundation, whether I use lead or not, but once I have my leather on it, I do take some sinew. I kind of have my own way I wrap sinew. I wouldn't just wrap around it like a cylinder. I might do that on one pass just after I've had it tacked or stapled. I tend to use staples over tacks because it's just, tacks may be slightly better because when they hit the nail, they'll curve and hook, while staples won't curve and hook. But you got to realize once you line up staples and then you sinew over it, nothing's going to have that staple come out.
Yeah.
So it's really a debatable issue, which is better. But once I would drop like a few staples around it, after I had the foundation on, I would definitely take sinew over it. So like if I had lead, I would staple it a little bit. I would put sinew, a thin layer of sinew, like 1 binding, we'll call that. That might define that. And then I would put the leather over it, and then I would staple that, then sinew it. But when I would sinew it that time, depending, I would shape it more with the sinew. Like I would do 1 whole ring around it, and then I would come back up the top. And I usually, and what I've been doing lately, but these change, I make it a little thick ring around the top so I know where I'm creating my, it's already kind of already there with my under material, but I kind of create the lip for the knot at the end of the heel. And then what I do is as I braid down instead, I actually loop around, and this, I don't know how you explain it, but I make loops and I make a circle with these loops. So it kind of creates almost
like an atom shape.
Yeah, like, because say you want to, the part of the heel foundation that touches the handle, not the butt, but the handle, as that laps down, like if you did a cap, you've got these little 4 edges sticking down that you've got to lash down or figure out. So what I'll do is I'll lap down over it a little bit, but I don't go past it. And then I come around the curve a little as I come back up. And then I just slowly rotate around it to create this thing that caps the bottom end, but also kind of creates an angled formation on certain knots. And then I'll just go back around it after I've already completed that. Then I'll go back around it like what you might call a layer of binding or two to fill in the spot that isn't like that head. But I mean, I do different ways. I mean, there's a lot you can do with it. That's just kind of what I've been doing a lot lately to kind of shape it in certain ways better.
Yeah. And using artificial sinew, I've been doing that too, using that to actually build the foundation of the knot. Like when you're wrapping that stuff, it builds up quicker than you would think.
Yeah, there's actually a lot of different techniques to build the shape.
Oh,
with it.
yeah.
And I think like Joe would do some pretty funky things with it, and I think it's good to do that. Now, again, to clarify, Nick is not using nothing but sinew, but you do it right. You can add some shape to it with the sinew to really get the pleasing shape you want. Like I don't really just do this, but say you guys wanted a more spherical handle, you'd still have to trim the sphere parts on the tips, but what you could do with the sinew is, and while you bind it, you just keep wrapping around so that it grows more in the center. I mean, you could use that sinew to help create more of a rounded effect in the middle of that knot too. So I mean, there's a lot you can play with, but definitely experiment. You could always, if you wanted to, which I've heard of a lot of great tips to help you guys figure out how to do this stuff, but I've never really gotten to them. I just make whips instead. But a thing you could do is get a stick with a heel knot on it, and then you can just shape it different ways and tie knots while you're watching TV. So you can be like, I shape it like that, I tied a knot, now you take the knot off. And then what you can do is You can undo the binding and try binding a little differently or change the leather. And you can just sit there while you're watching TV. I didn't do it because to me, I'm like, if I have time to spend 8 hours making these different knots, I could have made a whip. But you can do things like that if you want to get better at making heels and not just make another whip. So, but definitely when you experiment and change things up, take some measurements here and there and know what that change did. Because, later, and when you do experiment out there, as a general rule, don't experiment with 3 different things at once. You just made a whip and you see something you want to change. Don't change 8 things on that next whip. Change 1 of the major things and maybe a couple of the minor, but do not change these 8 big things unless you're really just new at it and there's a lot of bad things that need fixed.
Unexplored territory.
You want to just make 1 change because that 1 change is going to affect the whip. But if you have 3 different changes, it's going to fail your experiment because you don't know, well, was the change that 1 thing I fixed or the other 3 things I fixed? So now you're going to make a hypothesis that, I did this and that saved this problem with my whip. But then you'll make a whip just like it and it won't be anything like that even though you did the same things.
Very good point. There's a second part to Andy's question. This is a question for the ages. How do you get the strand length for your kangaroo hide bullwhip? I will hear your response in your next whipcast. Cheers.
I hope I'm being helpful, Andy. Thanks for the questions. To explain what I do, I kind of have to explain kind of how I look at whip making, but I'll just say this. Everyone says the general rule of thumb is braiding is length times half. In other words, if I want 6 feet braided, I need 6 feet plus 3 more feet, which is half, to be 9 feet to braid. Let's just look at that very simple commonality that we hear. Well, let's just say 9 feet did braid 6 feet. You got to have enough strands to hang on to tie a fall hitch. You've got, and if you're doing nylon, you got to have enough strands left over to create the fall. If you're doing it tapered down to 3 to 2 to 1, so 9 feet would never work for a 6-foot whip because you have to have something to hang on to finish the whip or finish it. So let's just say it was 9 feet 10 inches. So 9 feet 10 inches. 10 inches is more enough to hang on to and pull into a fall hitch. Well, you better hope that every part of your calculations are right if you did try to skirt the 9 feet 10 inches, because if your whip was thicker in girth or your strands were thinner than normal, well, with a thicker whip and thinner strands, you're going to eat up your material more. So the only way to have like I said, it's more guidelines than rule. The only way to have a rule, which can't be done, is you would have to make every whip somehow magically, even though it's a natural product cut by hand, and it's a natural product that is just, even when it's skin, like when you go to buy a kangaroo skin, they're split, but they're not trying to hit a certain thickness. Like they're not trying to be like every skin we sell at Packer or Taubman or wherever is 1 millimeter. They're trying to pull it through that splitter to make it all the same thickness. They're not trying to make it all a certain thickness.
Right.
So you can't just buy a skin and be like, kangaroo skin is 0.8 millimeters.
Yeah.
So that can kind of play a factor too. But so, unless you could make the perfect core the same every time, you could probably make your strands taper the same way every time and get an exact calculation of 9 feet 10 inches. But it's not going to happen because there's too many variations. Your cow may be thicker. You might not have, you don't have a belly to match. You just made your new belly. It may be a little thinner here and there. So like if the width of a kangaroo strand is thinner, or if the thickness of it is thinner, all that changes diameter. So there's like a lot of these little minor factors that are involved. So even if you could on one whip foreseeably make a 9 foot 10 inch strand that made it perfect, the odds that happen again are not going to happen. So you want to err in going long. And I would say if you're new to it and you're going to make like a 6-foot bullwhip, I would at least make them 11 feet long. And I would even say that that's pre-stretch, even though after stretch should be good. Mm-hmm. I would say pre-stretch to give you room, because when you start tapering these strands, whether you use a jig or you use a strander or you use it by hand, which like I do, I just take a sharp blade and a little wrap of leather around my finger so it doesn't bite if something goes wrong as bad. You're still going to have to taper these by hand, even if you're using these gauges or other things, and you kind of got, it's not really a guess, but you've got to guess on how thick to get it. And so unless you know how to taper at what point matches that whip, then you're going to be stuck with it having too much leather left over or too less. It's better to always go big and then go home, because if you go big, you still have enough strands. If you go less, you're going to have a shorter whip. So, length time half is a good general guideline. But again, I would say if it's 6 feet long, first of all, add a foot for your hands to braid, and I would add another foot at 6 feet. So, like I said, I would make it at least 11 feet on those strands pre-stretch before you braid that whip. I've actually been, and sorry to go off on a tangent, but to talk about my path is, I've realized with the way I make whips, and a lot of it is kind of Joe Strain-esque. I mean, I've had a lot of help from other people. Casey Tyler's helped me out a lot in the beginning, and Paul Nolan as well has let me put some whips on his site, and he'd give me some suggestions. And Bernie, I briefly talked to Del Carpio beforehand. I didn't really talk about whip making, but I've talked to him a lot since then. And all these guys, really did help me out with a lot of this stuff. But as I realized through my process, when I make a Kangaroo whip, I mean, yes, I have some artificial sinew when I got to lash onto a handle, and if I make a knot foundation. But other than having Kangaroo and cow and lead flashing, I mean, you might need some of these other basic tools like a hammer or for staple gun. But other than that, I just use a sharp blade for everything I do, and it's not like I'm unique because of it. Joe did it like that. Casey will do it like that on occasion. Steve does it on he'll do that too. Casey probably does it actually more often. Paul does it too. Bernardo, David Morgan, they all just kind of use the blade. They didn't really use these jigs, if you know what jigs are, or these stranders. They would just take a blade and they'd grab a strand and they'd prep their ice. And so by doing this process to where it's all hands-on, I take very few, I know this sounds crazy, I do take a lot of dimensions when needed for certain things, but when I actually prep an overlay and I have all the strands stretched out, I understand, depending on how many plat I got and what type of whip making, I generally know how fat I want to start. Let's say it's a 12 flat 8 foot. So a 12 flat 8 foot on the handle, it needs to be about 7 millimeters. It could be 7.25. It could be 7.55. You got to change your angle braid when it's too fat. But so I know I got to start out so thick for so long. Say a handle's 8 inches, starts out 7 millimeters or so. I want to have that 7 millimeters or 7.25. I want to have it tapered to 7 or 6.6 or something by the time it's around the transition area, so that it kind of shrinks the diameter. And so whenever I cut it, I get that initial diameter of how long I want for the handle to where I'm like, this is about where I'll fit on the handle and start to taper. And then I go down to where I want the taper to end. And then I cut my first strand and I put all that taper in that first strand. And then once I have that first strand made, I throw away my calipers, which I only needed it for 2 measurements. And then I just start attacking the other strands and match that first one. So it's a very artistical form that I do. I take very little measurements and just deal with what I've got while I'm dealing with it. And so I used to be really concerned beforehand about, I'm going to try to maximize my Kangaroo. I'm going to make sure that as I get to a certain point where I know it's going to shrink, I'm going to start cutting thinner strands. And I mean, you do that. You do want to kind of taper your strands. You're cutting them out of hide so you can maximize it. But I've realized this past couple years, I've been very wasteful is the best word for it. Wasteful whip maker. Not as wasteful doing other methods, but just like I will go ahead and like say an 8, length times half. An 8 foot would be 12 feet. But when I make a 6 foot, I've been making them 12 feet.
Yeah.
And I know it's been overkill. Like I'll sometimes on a whip, I'll end up with like a 1.5 or 2 feet of extra strand. But I see it as this. You're getting a premium whip. I'm trying to make you a premium whip the best that I can on a high caliber. So I'm not going to sit here and try to cut my corners or salvage my hide just to save myself money. It takes X amount of Kangaroo, and I will cut these. I will still taper a little bit, but I cut them a little wider than I would if I'm trying to be conservative. And I will have them longer than I want so that I can attack that clay. Like I just have a clay mold, and I want to make sure I have enough clay that I can make this as perfect as I want and not have to worry about running short or anything else. So I'm a little more of I guess you could say a little more wasteful. And that's what I mean by being artistic. Like I've noticed I attack things like an artist that has nothing but a canvas and a bunch of paints that he can't wait to just grab and tipper, and then just go to town on it. And I will have waste, and I'll be throwing these scraps of mold or like this clay off, and I'm just cutting away and like, here's what I don't want, here's the shape I want, and I don't mind that I'm actually a little more wasteful. I don't waste a lot. I waste more than I would if I was being conservative, but it's not all that much. But so I kind of attack things a little different like that. So if I told you, braid time half, but I told you, like I said, I will use about 12 feet on a 6 foot, and most people will be shocked, be like, that's too much waste. And I'm like, well, I want that because I'm making sure that you have enough and you'll have a superior product, and that there will be nothing wrong when I make this whip, because I don't want to have to go back and solve these other problems. And I'd rather have a thicker canvas to pleasingly make it look prettier. So.
And you make more progress when you're not so worried about waste. Oh, waste this, waste that. You get more learning experience. And talking a little bit about different methods for cutting lace out of hide. There's an Aussie strander, which is basically a little tool.
Finger tool.
Yeah, you put that and you just trim around the hide, the whole circle of it, and you can establish the width of your lace by turning a little wheel. There's another one where you cut a hole in the middle of a hide and then pop it through and pull it.
Yeah,
and it spins.
I have never seen that in person.
I got one, man. I'll show it to you after the show.
Steve showed me, or he didn't show me, but he told me that's what he started on. And I just sat there boggled for like 20 minutes, like conceiving, like, who would have ever thought about starting it like a donut from the inside out? Like, I'm like, how could you? It's so counterintuitive is the best word I've been using for it. It's like, how would you think to do that? Yeah, I know, that's hilarious.
It's a funny little tool.
Denny Williams is actually a very nice gateway strander. Gateway strander, if you guys haven't tried that. I bought one and I still never used it. I ended up selling to someone because they don't come around that often. Paul gets them in bursts. But I did want to use it. But by then I was just using a straight blade. And
Yeah.
Keep going. Anyway.
There's another one where I actually have it in the other room. It's like a steel pipe, basically. There's this guy on eBay was selling them.
Those look medieval to me.
I know, don't they?
Like if you're in a medieval whip-making torture chamber, that's what they'd be doing to make this whip they're about to beat you with.
So there's three different tools.
Bernie, I call it Bernie's Infernal Machine, but he has that. He made his own, but he had the guy make them, and I've actually owned two of those once because I ordered it and it didn't get here soon enough.
Yeah.
So I bought another one from some guy selling and stayed away, and then I used it, and then I sold them both once I got them. But on my second whip, I used Bernie's weird rectangle metal plater.
The metal one.
Like you'd have to be a master to make it work. I mean, you could make that work. I just couldn't. Like it drove me nuts. There are a lot of different ways to cut lace. There really are.
I took
David Morgan. You go on there, Megan. You can see videos of her doing it. They have this block of wood in your hand.
Yeah, it looks so crude, but it worked.
Yeah,
for
it's
that.
like it's almost like you got a handheld 2x4 that has a blade on it.
Right.
And, I mean, she uses that. Ultimately, whatever you do use, you can. I bet anyone out there, if you spend enough time, could make it work. But whatever feels best for you in your hand is what really matters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I actually tried to make a jig once by taking like a rail that you use for your stairs, a hand rail.
Yeah.
I took PVC pipe and tried to match up the curve. Didn't work very well. But all this is to say that you actually cut your strands freehand. Is that something that you always did? Or did you start with the jig? Was it always easier? And you do it because you just feel like it's natural.
It's freedom.
Yeah.
It feels like freedom. Yeah. And I wish unless you've done what I've done and then experienced what I experienced, can you really appreciate or be like, I'm with you, brother. The first one I did, like I said, when I visited Steve, is a 4-foot, and I think I put a video up on my YouTube channel with that where I showed. I think when I started this series, I haven't put much into it yet, but I want to call it like the whip maker's eye or how to have the whip maker's eye, or is whip making points of light understanding. It's really just to kind of showcase whips because when I didn't make whips, I didn't know what I'm looking at. So it's to help people know what they're looking at. And when I first went to Steve, though, I think I did do it all by hand. I think he showed me at least how to stick a blade in and cut. I might have used the Aussie strander. I think since I did a belly with Steve, I couldn't use the Aussie strander because it's too fat to do a 4-plait belly with. So I think I did that first one by hand. And then when I did the overlay, because he showed me, I bought that silly little finger strander, that $25 death trap, and that thing drove me nuts. And I don't know if they're better than this, but it seems like every time I want to, I use a yoke. If you're using Bernie's method, which I call the onion method, it's not really Bernie's method, but it's just in YouTube world, that's what they see. That's the method for making leather, is Bernie's videos. He would, like you said, he'd take that strander and just run around like a big circle until you have 200 feet of one lace that's 300 feet long, and even though Steve is still new, and I ended up using that on my first and second whip, that little finger thing. We still used a yoke because he was learning how to use a yoke at that point.
Yeah.
So I would have to, instead of just being able to go around the whole circle, I would have to unscrew the blade, cut a hole in my leather, slide that little finger track in there to lock the blade in so it can get in that groove,
right.
Rescrew that, and then go around till I get to my second strand, and then I have to undo it, cut a hole. I mean, it was so frustrating to like. I mean, if you're doing it Bernie's way, it's a magic tool. But if you do it with a yoke, it's just like it's so much hassle because you got to like shove the blade through the leather and lock it back into the strander and
like two parts coming from the top and the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, there's no easy way to do it with a yoke method, which is more what like Joe, Paul, Casey, me, Steve, and Bernardo and other people use. And so on the first one, I think I did use that on the overlay, and then. I thought, I'll try Bernie's thing. Let's try this device. And I was pretty, after I made that first one, I just kind of knew that I was going to at least make a few. I really want to be about it. And then, so I got a little ambitious and made a 10-foot 16 plat, What do you do from a 4-foot? You go right to a 10-foot 16 plat, kid, And I used his machine on that, and that thing was so beastie and crazy. I called it Frankenstein, and I can't believe someone finally bought it on eBay for like $180, which I thought was generous. Or wasn't generous. It was like, you're getting ripped off, man. $180 just did, but I used his square jig, whatever that square thing we were talking about that he sells. I know there's a name for it. He actually has a name, and the guy who makes it, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I just call it Bernie's Infernal Machine, and generally whip makers know what I'm talking about. And so on that one, I had to cut all the lace out, just like, I don't think I did. I don't remember if I did the Youngman method. I might have. I don't think I did, though. And then, so once I had all these strands, I had to run them through this thing. I went 6 millimeters. Then I get to the part where I wanted at 5.5, and you run it through that thing. And it was. I cut a lot of strands doing it. I had a lot of problems using the machine. I know that if I spent time with it, I probably could have figured that machine out. But I'm like, it is so just time consuming. And I felt constrained to be just stuck to this little device. And then my third whip, I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to freehand this. And so I stuck that. I have this really bulky, ugly little orange. It's a utility knife. It's not even a box cutter. Like Joe used a box cutter, which is basically it's basically a razor blade. I mean, it's this little metal guard that hides a razor blade, and you just stretch it out. And he's very delicate with it. And I've got, he's never been as big as me, but unfortunately, whatever you start with, you may not leave. And so I have this orange utility knife, not even a box cutter I use. And since I started with it, I've used it. I never grabbed another thing. It feels so right in my hand. I know I could have made other stuff work, but I didn't break it. I didn't need to fix it. And so on that third whip, I just stuck that guy in, and I just did everything by hand from that day on. And I can't explain the feeling of what I call freedom. To just have a leather and a blade and not have to worry about getting this Aussie thing to stick in and re-screw to slice, not have to run it. I have to run the strand like Bernie's. I got to run it 2 sides and then to prep and, all this stuff. And then also the whole process of having these, so the onion method versus the yoke, in case you guys don't know, like Nick said, the onion method is taking a strander and going all the way around a kangaroo so you have one long strand.
Yeah.
And then what they do with that is they cut it up into lengths, like we were talking about length time half. Well, we want a 6-foot, we're making 9, or So you have an 8-foot piece of leather, and so you get for the overlay you need 12, so you have 12 8 pieces of leather. And so once you get those out, now you got to measure, because you got to realize you're not doing this by hand. You're doing this little box that has 2 razor blades. So now you've got to measure every strand, and at 2 feet, I want it to be 5.5 millimeters. And then at 4 feet on all of them, I want it to be 4.5. So you got to take all these strands and try to run them through this stupid box, and then make sure each one matches the stupid box, and they all get it in there. And then, you'll watch these videos, these people that are basically doing Bernie's method, but just flagrantly just ripping them off. And they're not really changing or making it better. They're just kind of copy and pasting what he does in a way. And when you watch them do it, sometimes you see these guys, they'll braid their whip, and they're like halfway done. They're like, well, I got to resize my strands. And so now they're using, they're using some device, maybe not Bernie's. And so now, even though they already resized it, they realize it didn't fit right. So now they got to take the strands, and while they're mid-whip braiding, resize the strands of these infernal devices. And I'm like, how are you doing this? And I'm like, you're a whip maker. You shouldn't have to resize your strands halfway through your whip because it's not matching out. You should already know how to size your strands the first time and, wrap that present, get it out. I was like, you don't need to fix your wrapping paper again, And so, but to do that with that infernal device would be so mind-numbing. Well, having the freedom of just a blade in your hand, anything I need to do, if I need to trim it up, I just grab the strand, even though it's on the whip. I tie a half hitch to lock it what I need, and then I just grab the strand and I just trim it off. I don't have to worry about trying to find my machine and get it near wherever my whip's at. And now, not pulling a strand through, you got to realize to resize, at that point, you're moving a whip with a strand to pull through. It's not even just a strand in your hand anymore. You've got a half-braided whip at the end of this strand you're trying.
Keeping it, I've done that a few times.
Yeah, and so when you have this machine, you run your stuff through the machine, but with the blade, I run my blade through the whip. So it's almost does the same thing, but it's inverted.
Yeah.
And so it's just a lot easier. It's quicker. You know, I think a lot of things that when you understand the artistic way I do things, or I've let it do them, is that a lot of things involves with speed. Like, you don't want to rush and make a crappy whip. But at the same time, I think Joe said it best. I think Morgan might have told him. He said it's like time is money with me. I mean, that's not their phrase. I mean, everybody says that. But it's like when you're making whips, it's like time is money. So to spend 3 hours to do one thing that you could do maybe in 20 minutes, you should pick the 20 minute. And unless that 3 hours really made a completely supreme version of that whip to where it justified it, well then, man, I'd be like, oh, let's do it. Let's spend 3 hours making a core. You know, let's spend 24 hours till it dries, you know. And I'm like, if that's you, that's great. And it's not, I'm not slamming that. I'm just saying, you know, for you to be what I call a professional whip maker, and a profession does not mean you, if you're a professional whip maker, it does not mean you are a superior whip maker to non-professionals. What it means is most or all of your income to live on is provided by that industry. So to be a professional whip maker, I would say at least 55% of what you live off of should come from whip making. So time is money. You know, time is money. That so I don't make inferior product because I'm running behind on time. I mean, it takes the whip as long as it takes for me to make it. But you also got to learn to speed up your process as best you can and learn how to do things. And there's no reason to reinvent the wheel and take longer if it's not going to improve the work whatsoever.
Right.
So a lot of stuff I do, I do it because it is faster. I never mastered the burning method. I didn't need to, but I never mastered the burning method to see how quick can I make a burning whip, you know, and using a strander and cutting these all out and then resizing them all and matching them.
Yeah.
But I guarantee as fast as I could have probably gotten at that, I'm at least twice as fast doing it by hand than I ever would with the onion method. I cut all 12 strands off a yoke, I pull them out, I get the one the way I want, I match the other by hand, by eye. You could use jigs. You can use jigs on a yoke. You can use these other strainers on a yoke. You can use the Aussie on a yoke. It's not saying cutting by hand is better, or I'm not really talking about the method of a yoke versus the onion, but the speed is faster. I can just see a strand, I make it, I look at the others, I make it. I don't have to sit there and measure every inch of that strand or every foot or two that I need to make sure this is at a certain dimension so that it lines up with all my other dimensions, which may, as you see with these whip makers, halfway on a whip, I got to resize my whip anyways. I'm like, you just spent 5 hours prepping this method. I mean, literally 5 to 10 hours you will spend doing the burning method sometimes, especially if you're talking about a 10-foot, 16 plat. You know, you would spend 4 or 5 hours prepping that overlay alone, I bet. Even you could knock it down to 2. That's too long. I can cut a 12 plat overlay out in about a half an hour. You know, like a 12-foot, 12 plat overlay, or let's say the whole hide being cut out. It's like I could probably do a 10-foot, 12 plat overlay in about 30 minutes, cut it out, stretch in about 15. The way I stretch, it's pretty dry, not too long after that. I'd probably do some side work, but I could probably prep a 10-foot, 12 plat in 30 minutes as well. So we're talking about an hour overlay done. Hour and 15 minutes, and well done too. It's not just, I don't just rush it, it's crap, but it takes about that long. I may go a little slower some days because I'm just a little more relaxed, so I would add 20 minutes on procrastination. But like if I was in not a rush, but I wanted to not just enjoy the walk through the park, I meant an hour. I could cut and prep half hour. And if you did it the Bernie way, it'd probably take you a half hour to cut out. It may take you less time to cut out the whole skin just because you're just reeling a donut around.
Yeah.
But once you stretch, and now I got to cut, and now I got to individual. I mean, you waste more hide that way anyways, but now I got to line them, and I got to lash them to a handle after I prep them. I mean, there's just so much consumption of time to make a leather whip like a nylon. Nothing wrong with people that do it. I'm not saying those are inferior whips. I'm just saying there's the time alone. It will take you 3 times as long to make a whip if you did do these individual bellies and you did the Youngin method where it's like basically a leather version of a nylon whip. It's a lot of time consuming, and one could make a superior product. I mean, not superior like, oh, you're on my level. I'm just saying you could make one equal or better than mine with those methods. There's some people that do those methods or do the jigs to size it out instead of by hand. That like Peter Thorndike, I still think he uses these handmade jigs. He takes these clothespins and he has a whittled groove in it, and each one is set up like, this is my 7mm, here's my 7.5, here's my 6, my 6.5, and so he pulls out the jiggy one. So it's kind of like using those infernal machines, but again, it's almost like freehanding. So you have a jig, which allows it to where I put a piece of leather and it lands in the jig. And he already has his notches to know it's 7mm, so he just puts that blade on the 7 and he slides through the strand. So it's almost like making a portable infernal machine. But like Peter Thorndike makes some of the most beautiful. I personally think that they should have given him the whip award for the Man from Snowy River. They should have just gave him the best whip ever made in the creation of the history of the world that'll never be beat. Here's your cup. Don't come back again. Other people need to try. And that's the award he should have got for that. But he'll use those jigs, and he doesn't. It is kind of cut by him, but it's not, because it is a set jig at a certain length, and he kind of does it different. But, he does those methods, and it's a superior whip. But also, I talked to Pete a lot. He's like, it is very time-consuming to do that method.
64 strand.
And I will argue that it doesn't make, in a theory, because it's almost making a science out of the art again, because you're like, here's my 6mm gauge, here's my 5.5. In a sense, you could make a more superior whip, theoretically, to have hit all those marks, even if he does use a yoke, because he makes stock whips. You got to have a yoke for that. You're still not using the Bruning method. Another reason why you'd use these jigs as opposed to machine. So, like, you could theoretically make a more superior whip, maybe, like slightly be more aesthetically superior, but you got to realize there's still too many factors. Things will stretch more in some areas than other, and even though you hand stretch the crap out of it when you braid it, it's still, there's always a possibility a couple places will stretch just a little more. And so even if you did have the perfect width and everything lined up from your theory and making this stuff originally with these individual strands, it'll still have a margin of error that you would if you did do it by hand and by eye. So, if it's your way and you do it, that's great. You have the time to do it, that's great. However you want to make a whip, that you can even make a whip, I would say I would be thrilled to be you if I didn't know how to make a whip. However you made a whip, I would be amazed and thrilled to have made that whip you made, because it's like, you made it. And if to make another whip, you try to make it better, and that's really as simple as it is. But there are a lot of different methods and a lot of different ways, and if I ever do talk about my way versus another, or if I ever say something in here about I think it's better or superior or I prefer it, again, it's not saying my way or the highway. I'm not demeaning anyone else and their method because they use their method. If you find a whip from a whip maker and you like the way the whip works, congratulations, you found a good whip maker. I'm just saying that I think it's better for my own reasons, not that this is the best and I am the best whip maker. There is no such thing as a best whip maker, just like the perfect whip. I think one thing that qualifies you as a whip maker, when you finally say, hey, am I a whip maker? Now, I didn't say a professional whip maker. That's about finances. You can be a hobbyist, enthusiast, whatever. But every whip maker, one of their first realizations is, I want to try to make the perfect whip. And we all know it's unattainable and impossible, but we keep trying to make what we know is impossible every time. Which we want
that much closer.
We're really trying to say we want to make the most perfect whip we can at this point in time possible with what we got. But it's like, that's one of the things I think one of the little road attractions says, you made it to whip makerhood. You're in whip makerville now. It's like, I want to make a perfect whip.
And that's kind of one of the things that kept me going in whip making before I ever discovered that this was going to be a thing that made money for me. It was kind of okay, I made that one. All that was a heck of a lot of work, but I want to do it again just to get a little bit better. Yeah. And that's kind of what just pushed me to keep going, Yeah, make one every couple months.
I don't think anyone can master anything without that. I wouldn't call it perfectionism, being a perfectionist, but it's more like I have a bar I set for myself of excellence. Yeah. Like, I want to find how excellent I could be at this. Yeah.
Exactly.
I think that's an important part, Not everybody, and I think that requires a lot of passion that most people I don't think have. Like they have a curiosity, they want to try it, they do it. But, that's another determination that makes you the whip maker you are, Nick, is you came up to that passion of, I want to make the best. I want to be perfect. Like, I want to do better again. And, it's not always, you think it should be the standard, but it's like common sense. It's not common, and it doesn't seem to make sense to anyone else. It's like, wouldn't you want to be better or make it perfect? Or don't you see these problems? It's like, I'll hang out and let air dry my good with my bad, because I'm a fallible person just like everyone else. No one's perfect. I am perfect. No one else is. I hear everybody else is not perfect. It's easy to see. So it's like you think that every whip maker, that's the whip maker. He wants to make a better product, but you'll keep an eye on tabs of people. You'll see people on Facebook or other places, and you'll tour sites every now and again. I might just tour some sites. And sometimes you're pretty shocked. Sometimes it's shocking to see that a year's gone by and they're making the exact same looking whip, bar none, they did a year ago. Maybe they only made 10 or 20 since then. Maybe they made 50. But you'll see it and you'll just be like, wow, nothing's really changed. And then it kind of be a shocker. It's like you feel like 10 years gone by, and there's no difference in your work. It's like, he says, well, I must have mastered it, so why change it?
Yeah.
But there are subtle things that should improve, and I think once you get to a certain level, that's what you start working on. The little things that don't take much time, but overall improves the general quality of a product. You know?
There's a quite an enjoyment in kind of blazing new trails with whip making and experimenting like you're doing with your handles, just kind of throwing different ideas into the mix and just keeping it a fresh approach. And
I would say that's being an encourager. I've embraced my inner geek. Like, we used to grow up, my friend would talk about like, there's different categories like nerds, geeks, spazzes, dorks, dweebs, all this silly phrase you're growing up. And I'm like, I'm just a straight up geek, and a geek will just straight up geek out on some stuff. I mean, like they'll see something they love and they will just sit there and just watch this stupid movie for 3 hours and geek out on it. It's like, so there's a little bit of obsession with geeks. And so, I always embrace my inner geek. Not everybody's a geek. You can be a half geek, half spaz. I don't know. We had our own classifications, but it's nice to be able to see people like, it's like, I see your inner geek and no one else can see that, But I took that part of me, which I think is important for anyone, is quit trying to be the great whip maker, be you and just make whips and find out what it is that you do and you like, or what is it that makes you unique? Because while we all have watched Spider-Man, not all of us made a Spider-Man whip. And I'm not saying go make a Spider-Man whip, but it's like I embrace that inner geek, and I'm like, I started making these unique whips because I'm like, I just want to see it done. I've never seen a Punisher whip. I wanted to make a Punisher whip with a white handle and a black thong, and I'm going to drop a Punisher skull on that just because like I've never seen it. Who wouldn't want a Punisher whip? So it all segued up to eventually, like you said, making the Star Wars whips and these sword handle whips, and the mystery whips, just kind of a gambit. But other things like that. It's just like embracing my geek and willing to put money on something that's just no one. I've made whips I've never seen anyone make yet, and it's just unlashing and accepting my geekdom and knowing just like I made this because I want to make it, not because I expected to sell, not because I want to create this product for others. Just like I made it because I wanted to, and then. People, there's so many people like me out there. Anyone that has a whip in their hand, they're a geek. I mean, you can't generally you're a geek too. And so it's like, a lot of stuff, they're just like, that is pretty freaking awesome. It's like, I don't ever want to spend $800 on that, but that is freaking awesome. I'm going to go to you and we're going to get this. And I went like that. I'm like, that's great. And like I said, I've been very blessed with an opportunity to make some unique items, and that's something I'm kind of enjoy. Like I get excited when I get to make something unique, like you said, when you're making something new, and I love to make something unique. I've even offered some deals even though I didn't have to. I'd have customers that come up with something so awesome sounding. I'm like, I want to make it. I'm like, I'm going to cut you a deal on this just because I want it done. And I don't do that often, but every now and again they'll do it. Like, I love this idea so much. I'm going to cut you a deal because I want to have that and be able to picture that. So sometimes I'll do stuff like that. People come talk to me, I'll work with them if I can. I don't just like lower my bar or I raise it on my website and then I just lower whatever I want. But some people I'll help out here and there. I've donated to the LA whip meet a couple times. I've given whips away to students that have helped me out. Like I teach kids martial arts, so I'll have a kid that's about to be the older group and the junior adults that helps me with kids, and they'll spend like 6 months with me. I'll make them a whip, and I've given a few of those away as gifts. I mean, I've done quite a few things like that, but like I said, I'm very charitable when I can be, but having somebody offer me an idea, like I've cut discounts just so I could make it, and I know I would have got this sale at full price, but I didn't care. I'm like, you want this? I'll tell you what, like you really want to do this? I'll knock off $50. You do it now? They're like, heck yeah. I'm like, all right, let's get this done. Let's move it. I can't wait to make this thing that I've never made, that I've never seen anyone make. And I want to be able to, that's what really gets me going, is to be able to make something just artistically beautiful. Like Western Stage Props. I'm very fortunate to be a part of their family.
Oh, yes,
and,
yes.
Like they, when I after seeing Joe and us talking about him and stage props, and he suggested originally, like, man, you should send him some whips. I'm no longer making them for him, and send them some whips, see what they want. And I know Paul's there. Paul's been there for a while, long while, and Casey's been working with Paul, I think up until recently though, but he was working with, he's doing some stuff for stage props too, and I think it took him a while, but he finally got the Zorro gig, which is awesome. And Casey actually, Gotham, he does the Catwoman whips for them now too. So Gotham needed a whip for Catwoman. Casey got that whip order, and so
nice.
The whip on Gotham's Casey's, and But with this, Joe's like, send him some stuff in. And then I'm like, well, I'm not really trying to step on toes. I'm not trying to, like, I know Paul's kind of doing most of the Raiders or the Indy, and Casey may do a few, but, Casey's kind of got his niche. Paul's got his there. I mean, you got Russell Schultz and some other people doing stuff. But when I sent them in, I did send them a Raiders, but I thought I wanted to send them a couple things that are just mine, like the fader. I call a fader whip. And I think, I doubt I know I'm not the first person to use leather and start with one collar and add another collar, but I definitely took it to a certain series that no one's really done the way I do. I call the fader series, which I do 2 tones into one tone or 1 tone into another 1 tone. Like I made this 12-foot Zorro black whip. And then about after the halfway point, I introduced red until till all of it's a red whip. And so I had that laying around. I had another fader, and I sent those to Western with. I sent a Jones Jr. a little 3-foot, a 4'8" plat. Like if you go on my website, I have a whip making tutorial. I think it's like $150 to have for a lifetime to stream. It's not really asking for much for what's all there. It's just, but I also offer myself. Like if you just buy that basic package, I'll still answer any question you got. You can call, you can talk. If you don't buy it, I'll still answer any question you got. I'll talk. I'll help you out.
Right.
But the video series is good, and I made on there. I showed how to make a Jones Jr. whip. But that's the one I sent the Western Stage Prop that they sell through there. And but I sent that Jones Jr. and those 2 faders, and I sent him an 8-foot just so they could see my Indy stuff. And again, I wasn't trying to step on Paul's or anyone's toe. And then they saw it, and they're like, they're pretty blown away. They're like, I've never seen like that. This is a fresh take. I've never seen anyone have this leather, turn it on the leather like it. So they really love the fader. I think both those whips are still up there. And so after that, they start, they're talking to me, and they're like, it just, like I said, just favors constantly just overpouring on a lot of things if I really go over my whole career. But then they're like, hey, we got on your site, we saw these saber whips. We do a lot of Comic Cons or things like that, and these conventions. Like, I think they'd sell. And so I made them a couple saber whips, and I'm like, you know what? I wanted to make a Jack Sparrow themed pirate snake whip, and I wanted to make a Batman target whip, which I made one before, but I made one. So I'm like, you know what? I'll make these. They're like, I talk, I'm like, yeah, I'll send it in. So I sent them to them, and so I made these a unique whip, which to me is like, well, there's only one pirate's whip, guys. I'm like, there's only one Batman. And I sent it to them, like, and they're like, oh, we love it. They put it up. And then the Batman sold them, like, we need another Batman. I'm like, okay. And then I realized whenever you buy anything, I don't know if they know how to work all their PayPal so much. It's like when you buy anything, it's like, how many do you want to add to your basket? So it's like you could buy my 12-foot black and red fader Zorro. You could buy 80 of them or something, It's like, and I'm like, so they took this, which I'm so thankful that they put them in stock. But they're just like, well, now the Batman's a series of theirs. And I'm like, I made a one-off. It's like, awesome, I can redo it. But it's like, no. I do not want to make another Captain Jack Sparrow snake whip, but I will when it comes. Right. But it's like, that wasn't my intention. It's like, my intention was to have a one-off, unique whip. Yeah. If you want this Batman whip, guess what? You're one of the only ones getting it. And, I mean, not that it's a problem recreating it to an extent, but like that was something I wasn't expecting. I'm like, there's just one Captain Jack. It's like, no. Now they have it to where if it sells, they're going to contact me and be like, all right, we need another one. I'm like, all right, I'll get it done as soon as possible. But like, I wasn't expecting that, and I've been just well received by them. And I'm just so thankful to be a part of the Western Stage Prop. And I kind of have their unique whip offers because, like you said, that's one thing that stands out to me is just my creativity and my vast random unique creations. And so I think they were really excited about that, to offer something again, which is why I do it, to offer something no one else is offering. I would definitely say in that regard, I am definitely the most innovative whip maker currently out there. Not innovative on making a superior whip, just making unique creations,
new ideas,
weird, geeky, unique handles, you name it,
I feel like 2016, 2017 has kind of been the age of enlightenment, so to speak, with whips, if you will. We got April Choi doing her LED light thing, her Allen whips. And
I'd like to get a set of those. I was going to talk about making them. I think she's so busy with Guinness and other stuff, she's kind of sworn off making some things for a while. But there's other people doing it. I think the LED is a brilliant idea. Keep going. And what else? There's a lot of unique things that came out.
Absolutely.
The LED was a nice touch.
Yeah. So, Blake, what are some goals for your whip company in 2018? What's next for Trinity Whips?
Well, I don't know if you can really say I have exactly like this is the one goal. General goal is, like I said, I'm about to make my 500th. I was going to make it today or yesterday, but this is my time to come up here, and it'll be prolonged. But I kind of want to make that 500th this week, and I probably will Friday. But my main goal, and when I realized I was serious, there's an old adage I think David Morgan said, and I don't know if he told it to Paul, but Paul shared with me, is David said that once you make 1,000 whips, you will realize how little you actually even know about whip making. Kind of like, was it Plato or Aristotle that said true wisdom is knowing you know nothing. So it's like, I think that's how that equates. Like once you make that 1,001, and even though you're really good at a certain amount, you'll realize that there's so much at that point because you've been in it so long that you just will never master or know. And so I always saw 1,000 as a goal. Like, and I want to hit that 1,000. And I'm just so thankful and floored that I got to 500 in 4 years. And I'm not going to take another 4 years if I can help it. The first year I made 70 or 75, and the second year I made like 85. I think it was 85 or 90, and then, the next year I made like 160 something. I used to have it written down, how it was. But then so I made like whatever was left, like almost 200 this year or something. But I'd like to think in the next two years or so I'd like to hit that 1,000 mark. That's definitely a goal. It's definitely not a goal for 2018. Mm-hmm. If I could make 500 whips this year, I would be very happy. Mm-hmm. I don't think that's a possibility now though. Like I've been very fortunate on, like I said, on just blessed in a lot of areas from like Stage Props, Time with Joe Strand, and other great whip makers. My unique series I've got up. The website's doing great. I've added a lot to my YouTube channel. We can talk about that later. But I would say one of my goals is I really want to get one of my whips on a silver screen. Yeah. It's actually in graphs just by dealing with Stage Props. I've also talked to a couple other people that are actually in the movies, which I don't know if that'll be lucrative, but I'm looking forward to that. I've had a lot of nice marks that happened this year. I don't, once again, I don't know how I can talk about this, but like I sent a whip into the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular show in Florida, and I got a hold of them through Joe, because Joe let me get a hold of his old contacts, because he used to run those whips, and then this last gig he passed on, and I didn't catch it before they went to someone else. But he told me, once again, Joe's suggestion I send something in. So I got a hold of these guys and sent a whip in, and they field tested a 10-foot Raiders. I actually brought it with some of my stash that you can check out. But that went through the gambit there. And they said it was very favorable, response I got from them, let's just say that. And they got to realize they buy like, I don't know, 10 whips at a time or 20 or something. And then they don't buy whips for like 2 or 3 years. But from what I understand, I could be wrong, but I think I might get the next bid for the Disneyland Studios, the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular, and hopefully that'll happen that year. I wouldn't really call that the silver screen. I mean, I've got a whip in Circus du Soleil. I've had other circus performers using my stuff, and Adams used it. April 1, the most newspapers targeted with my record maker. And with my seal, I originally had the record maker set up that if you could break the most cracks in a minute, I'd give you the whip for free. And she didn't win that record. She won another, and I went ahead and just gave it to her as a gift. So after she won the record, I went ahead and said, well, it wasn't the record. It was on the site. So I just changed the site and just said, any record you make. But I went ahead and just gave her that gift and said, congratulations on winning it. But that was something really nice that happened this past year, too. Like I said, I'm really hoping to get the silver screen. And I know through Stage Props is where a lot of these got in. Like, that's where Joe got a lot of, not all of it, but he got a lot of his movies in through orders through Stage Props. Like, that's where Casey got his Gotham. Paul got Joe had the Lone Ranger originally, but then they needed more whips, and they sent it to Paul because they forgot they sent it to Joe or something. And I mean, they did some other things like that too, where they had a lot of their movie whips, a chunk of Joe's and Paul's and some other people did come from Stage. So being a part of that family, I know I'm earmarked for that in the future, and I look forward to that. Mm-hmm. I hope it's a movie I like if it happens. I just hope it happens, but it'd be nice to not be a movie that my morals are completely against. Right. But I would love it. I don't really want a 50 Shades of Grey, but I'd take it, I guess. But I would like that to happen. That's one goal I'd like to see.
Cool, man.
It'd just be nice to have on my belt, just to be able to show that to people, and not like I'm going to ride that coattail, but I would say that's something I would love to see. I'd love to see happen any year, but I would love to see that happen this year. I can't really influence that goal too much. Just keep doing what I do, and keep knocking it out for Stage Props, and they'll get an order, be like, we'll send this one to Blake. So hopefully that'll happen in the near future.
Cool, man. That would be spectacular. As a whip maker, I mean, to see your work in a film, like, man,
something that other people can relate to, because like right now like I tell people when you talk about, my wife has to introduce herself sometimes, and like, well, what's your husband do? And it's like, oh, Well, she's like, well, he teaches martial arts, and she still does it. I tell her, like, just tell martial arts. Don't even say whip making, like, just say martial arts. But she'll say, like, well, he makes whips. And then I say, whenever you say this, you have to add immediately without a breath.
Indiana Jones.
Like Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
It's like, that's the ultimate profile. It's like, whenever you say to somebody, hey, I do whip cracking, I make whips, and then you either get one of two things. Oh, like Indiana Jones? Or they're like, oh, yeah, I bet your wife likes that. It's always some S&M humor, because that's how the world associates whips. It's either Indiana, and it's funny, even the non-whip world, it's either sex, S&M, or it's Indiana Jones. Right. So I say, just say it now. That way you don't have to deal with the joke that's going to come up every time you mention it and have to blush and play it. I'll just say, like Indiana Jones. Yeah,
for me, it's routine. My routine is I'll just be like, I make bull whips for cattle ranchers.
Yeah, that's not bad. That's a good diffuser too. Yeah,
you ever seen the movie Indiana Jones? Some people, when they say no, I'm like, I'm done. Bye.
Yeah. But that's another thing too. It's like you have nothing to show people. But like Indiana Jones would be one, but there's only one Indiana Jones. Or like when people watch Zorro, they notice the whip. Like Lone Ranger, they barely use the whip. So you wouldn't be like, I see a Lone Ranger, But like it would be nice to have a movie that encapsulates whip making, or not whip making, but whip cracking in a way that it could be accessible to the average person. And I'm going to say this real quick because I want to. If you guys are making a movie out there, you in movie land, looking for whips and you hear this, come to me. I've got some great choreography ideas for my martial art training.
Yeah.
But what I would want to see is, I want to see a scene where the star has a whip. The whip is used to a lot of stuff, but most importantly, there needs to be a scene in the movies where the guy shows maybe a kid how easy it is to do a cattleman's crack, or just to do a crack. And maybe he shows him how to snuff out a candle, I don't know, cut a leaf. Either way, he shows the kid how to do that. And by doing that, he also shows the world how to crack a whip, and that's that easy. And I think that would help grow, because right there it lets people see how to do it, easily taught. A kid can do it. It's now accessed and available on a worldwide media level, as opposed to you're that one geek looking on YouTube for how to crack a whip.
Yeah.
So I mean, I would love something like that to happen. I think that's what it would take. Like Iron Man 2, man, that should have made whips explode. Joe made those whips.
Oh, yeah.
But the problem is, no one knows the real whips, because the studio's sitting and put like these metal exoskeletons on it, and
they're
CGI
keyframing all this lightning.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like no one knew there were whips, and it's like the Kingsman just came out, and it's Kingsman 2. The Statesman whip is an all CGI whip. Yeah, they have a rope to it at one point, and they might have this quick prop, but it's like it was, there's no real whip there. I'm like, these like Iron Man 2 could have really launched, because you got to realize Iron Man 2 was a huge blockbuster hit, and to have Mickey Rourke using whips, it's like, I think that could have really enticed the public. But again, it became an electric superhero whip that no one could ever have in their hand. So I think it killed the ability for the average person to realize, this can be done. It's out there. I can get one. I can do it. And I think if we have a movie that can convey that in one small way, like I said, just a hero showing a kid how to do it, and then maybe that kid uses that technique to help him out at the end. Like something like that, I think would help, if not our generation, start the next generation of kids so it can grow. But you out there in the whip world, and the whip community, and the whip cast, if you guys don't open up and share what you do with others, try to find local whip groups, or try to create local whip meets with the people in the area, it's not going to grow. We don't have to grow. But one of my mission statements is, I do want to see the whip community overall grow. I want twice as many people out there cracking whips. And unfortunately, if it is to be, it's up to me, the old adage. So if it is to be, you've got to do something about it. You've got to contact all your friends. Just once a year, set up a whip meet. Find a park, invite everyone and your friends' friends. But if you guys are out there in a park cracking whips, and a lot of people are doing having fun, you're going to get people around you to come in. Because I can't see any other way to really get people into this. If the movie industry ain't going to do it, it's up to us. And sadly, it's one person at a time.
Yeah. I keep a whip in my car all the time.
I keep a Paul Nolan little snapper in my coat pocket.
Nice. Yeah.
Like I had one before I made on my own, but I just keep that on there. So if it ever comes up, I've only pulled out a handful of times, but it's like, there it is, and it fits in a fifth pocket.
Yeah.
Paul Nolan, your little snapper fits in my fifth pocket of jeans, and that is phenomenal, because that's what a fifth pocket, I found it is actually for, a Paul Nolan little snapper.
Yeah.
But I put that in my fifth pocket when it's warm. I'll just keep it in my pants pocket, my short pocket, and just have to whip out if needed. I don't use it a lot. But it is good to have some product. Like if you go to a high school reunion one day, like, what do? You make whips? Is there anything to show? I don't really. I can't use a 12-foot bullwhip.
Yeah, oh no, I'm on a cards.
Without getting frisked or brought down by the security, or he's got a whip.
Yeah, I was at a wedding last year with a couple of my friends, And at one point, we're sitting at a table, we're eating. It's the reception, actually. And we get to talking about what we do, and I say, I make whips. And they continue saying, well, okay, what?
And it's the conversation stopper. Like, everyone's gears are slowly turning. Right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh.
Sometimes you get a, what? No, show me. I'm like, all right. So I run to my car and grab a 24 plat white Dacron whip that I made.
That's the one with that star concho, right? That thing was pretty sweet.
Yeah, I still have that in my car.
It rolls out well.
Thanks. 2 degrees is probably not great for it, but but anyway, I take it out and I crack it a few times, and they're blown away, like they've never seen something like that in person.
I know, it's insane. I mean, I was that guy too. Up till 10 years ago. It's just like Katniss came out. The archery business flourished with Hunger Games.
I bet it did.
Because it wasn't just an archer. I mean, Rambo came out. It's a girl. It is a 15-year-old girl with a bow.
Yeah.
So there's so much collateral came in. Like that was their moment. That was their 15 minutes in the archery world. I mean, the Arrow's doing good. I'm sure you get people from shows like the Arrow, but like that Katniss brought young girls, tweens.
Oh yeah.
Twilight tweens. Like these girls in on that block, and unless we have something like it, I mean, how are you going to know unless you are the nut? We're the nut to our friends, and our friends have us as a nut. No one's going to crack a whip, have a whip, unless they grew up on a ranch. And the half time you talk to ranchers, it's like there was only that one guy that ever really had a whip. Like, well, we had this one guy that used to make whips, and he always had a whip, but man, I never really played with him like I should have. And now that I'm 40 years old, I'm looking for some exercise. Like, I like a whip from you. And I'm like, that's great, but it's like, there's always someone at a rancher only knows that one guy. And you think if anyone would have whips, it'd be ranchers, so right. It's just really shocking how, I wouldn't say our society is introverted, but just so how small the world is, like the whip world is. Like, it is larger than, I mean, I don't know everyone, I don't know half of everyone, because you do find out there's more people all around the world all day long from these different Facebook groups or YouTube channels. And I mean, there's constantly stuff popping up, but it really is a small world as far as professional whip makers, or we all kind of know each other to an extent or have talked to each other. And it's a very small community, I think recently, there's happened before where new whip makers will, I don't think they know what they're doing. Sometimes they might. I mean, people argue. But I think they'll take pictures of their whip makers, and then they'll put it as their product. Like, I can make this. I think they're just trying to say, I know how to make an Allen whip. I could make this for you. But I'm like, you shouldn't do that because you didn't make that whip. So honestly, you can't make that whip. Yeah, you can make a red and white whip like that, but that's not your whip. And I think some people do it fraudulently, but some people don't. They're just trying to be like, well, I don't have the work to show people what I probably could do. And that's caused a stir in the world. But like I said, it's such a small world that, you can't even rip off pictures without half the people recognizing that's not your whip. That's a Red Kelly.
You're right.
That's a Thea Reed. That's a Schrader special. It's just like, you can tell that stuff, and and it shouldn't be that small. Like, this world, since it is worldwide, I mean, it shouldn't be this small. Like in Australia, it's a whole other world. Like Australia's whip cracking is like our baseball. Like, not that baseball is really popular anymore, but like America was known for apple pie and baseball, and it's like Australia is known for kangaroos and turning them into whips.
I want to see a video where somebody goes out and hunts a kangaroo, and then like processes it. They eat the meat. And then
Richard Talbot, man, I'm telling you, I don't know if he eats the meat. Maybe he makes a dress out of the head. I don't know, but he died. I found out that not through him, so I could be wrong, but I found out that he actually hunts the kangaroo. The skins I get from him, he hunts the kangaroo, and then he sends it into pack or wherever to get processed, and then he'll. I buy my exotics from Richard Talbot. He's in Australia. You guys ever want to get some good exotic leather? Definitely go to Richard Talbot as far as like getting the. There's other people, but like the red. Well, not the reds. Reds are drum stuff, but like the blues, the greens, the yellows, the crazy oranges and stuff like that. Definitely go to Richard Talbot. I've gotten from him for a couple years, and he takes care of all the imports and documents. So you can just buy from him, and he'll mail it to you. But I would recommend only buying in small orders. Not saying to avoid customs. I am certified certified through customs and I have my permit so that I can import. But I thought I was already certified, and something happened in the process, and so I just started getting shipments in, and they always came. So I thought, oh, maybe everything's working out right, because, and then eventually I bought a bunch from Packer, and I got like, I don't know, 115 kangaroo skins I ordered, and they came in 3 big shipments, but they all got stopped at the same time, and so I had to make sure the paperwork didn't go through. I had to redo the process. But it's like I got skins from Richard for a year and a half, no problem. But I'd only get like a smaller amount. So I think when I came in with these 3 big bundles of like, 33 skins a bundle, and they all came at the same airport in Chicago, they're like, we're flagging this.
Yeah, right.
And so most of the time you don't get caught by customs, but if you do, you're in for it. You're going to have to, spend $200-$300, well, $300 to $400 to get your permit, processing fees, and a couple other things. And I never had to worry about it. I thought I was clear. Like I went ahead and went down that bridge. I crossed that bridge before I got to it. Turns out it wasn't crossed, but I did that in case. But either way, I got tons of shipments from Richard without around my customs. They never got stopped because I think the problem was getting too big. And I've talked to some other whip makers that do it too. And they're like, yeah, if I keep it within like 20 skins, it's so small or so whatever, no one stops it. But every time I did get stopped, I had like 50 plus skins. So keep the order somewhat small and be ready to get a Fish and Wildlife and pay for some fees just in case. You got to always keep that in mind, And if you're in California, this is interesting too. Like I think it's illegal for you to import skins to California still. They've had this ban going on. But the thing is, you can buy a kangaroo skin from like say Sheridan Leather or Texas, somewhere in Texas, like Harkey or these other places. You can buy it and ship it to California, but you can't get a skin imported internationally to California. So, every now and again, I have whipmaker friends that'll have me buy my skins or buy them through me. So then when I get them, I just ship them across the border because they're not getting it from Australia anymore. They're getting it from me in Indiana. Yeah. And it's just, you definitely want to check your laws like that too, in some of those cases. And there's ways to work around it. Like I said, you can have kangaroos shipped to your house. It just can't be from Australia when you get it in California. There's all sorts of loopholes and things until you've been in there. You have to get caught with that.
While we're on the subject of kangaroo hide, I get a lot of people asking me about using chrome tanned hide, which is chemically tanned hide. What do you feel about using that? Because it's definitely cheaper than drum stuffed.
My strengths when it comes to whip making is not let's is that on? Is not not doing like I don't know the history of whip making as much. Like there's other people that really stick on who taught who taught that. Like Tom Hill had Terry Jack was his last apprentice, and Tom Hill had all these other guys, and then David Morgan learned from him, and they just said that Tom Hill's original design was the Indiana Jones whip, although David Morgan used the nail spike, which is unheard of, but the double belly method, other stuff came from Tom Hill in Australia. I mean, there's all these histories from America and Australia. Like, I am not that guy. I do know names, but I'll even confuse some names because they're so old and I don't use them every day. I don't remember who taught who and everything. And when it comes to understanding leather, I only do kangaroo. I mean, other than the cow and the kip I get in, I only do a kangaroo. So I have gotten different kangaroo, and I've even lost money trying different kangaroo from eBay to just other stuff. I mean, you just might as well try it. I've tried a lot. I've gotten some kangaroo from people where I'm not even sure what type it was. Like I got this one kangaroo that I think I asked Joe what it was because he said it was odd. He said, I think it's aniline tan. I still don't know if it is aniline tan, but I did research aniline tan. It could have been aniline tan. I'm sure I've had some chrome. I've had some veg. I love drum stuff. The only problem is in drum stuff, that's where you get your earth tones, like other than red. So you get like natural, saddle tan, whiskey, brandy, black, and red. And you usually get those in the States. But again, all kangaroo you find in America came from Australia. And one way or the other from Australia. But like I love drum stuff better than veg tan. Now, I know people are going to be like, drum stuff is veg tan. It's just then oiled in a drum. I know that, but we call it drum stuff, so you don't have to say, I'm getting veg tan drum stuff. It's like, I'm getting drum stuff. We all know what that means, But like, I don't understand the full tanning process and all this stuff. I know buyer beware on eBay. Watch what you're buying. There's some guys in there that you get from Australia and sell them super cheap, and it may be crappy hide that really ain't made for leather. I will tell you that if you do experiment and you do, like, I'm sure I've used chrome tan. I don't know if it was chrome tan, or I may even have some chrome tan. I know Richard, he has some sort of tan. I think it's more than just veg tan, all his collars, but the tensile strength seems to be great. But with that, if you get a piece of kangaroo and you're like, I just don't trust it, or I don't like it. I don't think it'd work good for an overlay. Well, and if it's cheap, you just found good bellies. Mm-hmm. So, worst case scenario, the middle piece will make some nice colorful accent knots. So even if you get a skin that you don't think would actually be worth the wrapping paper, which is very important, the outside layer, you can still use it for the inside, or use it for other stuff, involved with the process. So don't be afraid to try it. Like I said, if you're already making whips and you've made a few and you want to experiment and money's not that big of an issue, it's still, money's always an issue, but you find a good deal for this $40 skin from Amazing Go, or whatever the guy's name is, Anime Amazing on Australia Go, whatever these guys from eBay on Australia. Man, might be want to order it, and then you can see, this is why I don't buy this skin. But you get to compare it and you realize, okay, that's weird. It's all leather. I can't believe leather feels this different or stretches this different. It is crazy. I was talking to Peter Thorndike about the other day that it's very interesting that when we get our kangaroo skins, that it seems that whatever the dye process is, now I'm not talking about whether it's chrome tan or veg tan or drum stuff, the dye itself affects that creature. Mm-hmm. That has nothing to do with the actual process to whether it accepts water or doesn't accept water. And like we've noticed on certain skins, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I was talking to Peter about it, and I'm like, I think maybe it's purple. Like every time I get a purple, it doesn't want to take water at all. Mm-hmm. And there's like some other colors that kind of do it. Like anytime you get saddle tan, it tends to be, whenever I get saddle tan regularly, saddle tan tends to end up always being a red species, which usually want red species for like high plat counts. I believe it's red instead of black, or red. I think it's red species, and is it black species, or is it, I forget what they call the kangaroo. Maybe it's blue, but they have different species name. But like the red is the one where apparently you can tell by the pores in it. Like when you actually see the pores, you can tell by the way they range whether it's a red species or not. But that one is apparently a stronger leather. So when you make like 64 plat, you want red species. You make like 72 plat, just because the way it's just something about it that's better on the way it stretches or how strong it is. But it seems to be like whenever I get a saddle tan, it's always just happens to be a red species. It just stretches unbelievable like that, or has the same pores. Like, what do they do? Wow. They just say, well, here's a red species. It's going to be saddle. I don't think they do it, but it tends to be like that. Certain things like I've never had a problem with brandy snapping. I've had tons of saddle snap. Every now and again I get a bad natural. I've never had a problem with the brandy. Maybe once or twice, but it's like, it seems like whatever the dye is used on the brandy strengthens that hide. And it's weird that some of these hides are like that. And even with the exotic colors, you found certain colors are making a hide stretchy. Certain different dyes are making them not want to absorb water because whatever's in that dye is an expectorant, or whatever you want to call it. I don't call it expectorant, but it's like water resistant.
Right.
You might, in which case, if you have a skin and you guys are trying to stretch it or work it, look, usually you get a wet stretch. Do not use hot water, first of all. Do not hot water wet stretch leather. And it's not because it's going to destroy the skin. It's because when you wring that out in that hot water, it's going to take all the oils out of that skin. And you can still use it, but if it's natural, I bet in 3 weeks it's saddle.
I made that mistake a few months ago. Yeah.
Like base and stretch technique. That's something we can touch on a little bit too. Like what I used to prepare that. But so say it doesn't take water very well. Well, then use lotion. You got to. Use cream, not lotion. But you can use some of your Dubbin or something else you have. You could, I'm gonna, not Picard's. You want, and I'm not talking about plaiting soap. You could use plaiting soap. But if you're trying to stretch it, you don't want to wet stretch because it doesn't take water. Get some other type of leather conditioner on that to stretch it. That way, it still lubes it up so it's not dry, and it'll still do the same effect as water. But like that's something else. You just can experiment and play with, and when it happens, you'll know what to do now.
Mm-hmm.
But like that. Like there's little things. Like when I first learned to stretch my strands, I believe, I don't know if Steve was doing it off the Bruning method, but you'd have like a little hook on a wall or a little latch somewhere, and then what you would do is, I think this is where we would. I don't know if we did a little half hitch on it where you tie a little loop. We might have just actually pulled it back and forth. Some people put a little half hitch. Put a little half hitch on it. So in other words, you just you lay the strand on the little hook or corner, pull, whatever it is you're going to stretch it on, and then you just basically tie a loop around it. And then when you pull it through from one side to the other, that little loop goes around the strand. So when you pull it through, the strand that's coming through is wrapped around and it's smashing that area. So it gets pulled through this really tight. I guess you call it an eye. That it's getting pulled through of the strand that's already pulled through it. And so you'd pull this and stretch it hard. And I forget where I heard to use hot water. So for a while there, I was using hot water. And hot water did seem to do certain things to it that I thought were made sense and made me better. But then after I started getting into it more and I watched how Joe stretched, I realized how wrong it was. And it was one thing I couldn't answer for a handful of whips there was for a while was whenever I noticed that like my natural wouldn't stay natural very long. It would just darken so fast. And I found out, and if you ever noticed it, if you ever did do hot water, that's why, like I said, the hot water would take the oils away when I stretch it. But it would also take it away because when I wrap around a hook and pull it through, and if you've ever done this, you guys out there, where you took a leather strand and got it hot or not hot, but you wrapped it around that little hook and pulled it through, it is splattering water. Like water is launching off that hook as you shoot it. Like your whole back wall is going to be dyed black or whatever you've got that hook on from all the splattering. And so you'd pull it through, but you got to realize all that water isn't just water, and all that oil or that dye isn't just dye. It's the oils in the dyes from that skin that are leaving your product by putting it in a half hitch. Even if it wasn't hot, that half hitch sprays out and makes you lose your oils. Yeah. And my biggest problem with stretching conventionally, where you wrap around a little half hitch or a hook, what I do is I have a yoke, so I'll put a yoke. If you want, put it in a vise, but I'll put a yoke on a hook, and then I just pull. I just actually pull straight back. Well, not quite like how you braid, because we're not talking about braiding technique, but instead of wrapping around a hook and pulling the strand through, I just grab the very tip of the strand, and it's anchored on the wall, and I just pull straight back until I feel every ounce of stretch come out of it.
It distributes that tension, so you're not...
And that's how I saw Joe did it, and I got to tell you, it changes your game as far as time and ability. So when we get it hot and we half hitch it, or we don't get it hot, but we half hitch it and pull it through, here's what I notice on my own. Once again, I could be sincerely wrong, but what I noticed is when I wrap it up round and then I start stretching it in that little half hitch, it did stretch the leather. Mm-hmm. But you got to realize it's getting pulled through a little loop around a round hook. And so it's not stretching straight like how I would braid. Part of it's stretching left, part of it's stretching right, part of it's stretching forward. It's really almost like a random 360 stretchathon going on as you pull that strand through that half hitch. And so it's not all stretching the same direction in the same way. Yeah. And so not only are you losing oils, and you're also creating rough curves. Like when you have to knock off the rough of your strand, by putting on a half hitch, you're going to have tons of hard, it feels hard too, like hard jagged turns that you got to knock off because you used that half hitch and pulled it through. And it makes even the prep work even more crazy, whether you used it by hand or used a jig or whatever. Yeah. And so by pulling, and also here's the other thing, how long do you have to wait for that to dry? When you would immerse it and hook it, like it shot a lot of water out, but also by running it through that hole, you also shoved a lot of water in there. It took a lot of water out, but it also it kind of reverse sponged it. It made that water shoot out, but it also, as it came through, it absorbed in what was in there. Yeah. So you have to wait overnight or several hours for it to dry. Yeah. I used to put a fan on. Like after I did, I'd put a fan on, and then it'd take a half an hour to an hour for my overlay and belly to dry. I showed Steve that trick, and he's like, "That's brilliant." And that was years ago though, but I was like, "That's brilliant." I'm like, "I know, right? I ain't gonna wait 2 days for a day overnight." But now with the other method I do, where I dunk it in room temperature, I put it on a hook and I pull straight, I can literally start prepping it in 20 minutes. It's already dried up enough. And then after you stretch it, you can just take a cloth and rub it down. Mm-hmm. And it's probably dry in 20 minutes. Ready to work on, not wait overnight. And it's all stretched in the same way. And it's being stretched straight back. It's also stretched in the same way so far as speak as how I'm braiding it. Not that I pull straight back when I braid, but the fact is you're pulling on a strand. And when I braid, I would be pulling on the strand the way I would braid anyways. So you're not pulling it through this random loop that's twisting around a loop to get out. It's even getting stretched in the way you'll braid. And even though, no matter how much you stretch out anything, there might still be a little stretch here and there. So, it's going to happen either way, whether you did do the round method or you did do the straight pullback. But I got to tell you, the time you save is immense. It's all stretched the same way. Mm-hmm. And also, like I said, you know how it's stretched, which I already kind of repeated that, number 2. But you know how it's stretched. It's not some random circle to where it's creating these weird curves out of the straight lace, which makes it more difficult to prep and everything.
In addition to that, one of the biggest reasons that I switched over from using that method to just the straight pulling back method is that whenever I would get done stretching the hide, I would have these concave shapes along the entire strand that I had to work with. And then when it dried, it would kind of dry like that.
It'd be hard.
Yeah,
because it just turned into a drier hide.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's where Casey sent me these little, he used to make his own little jigs, kind of like I talked about. Peter had these on the previous podcast. Peter Thorndike has these little clothespins he makes his jigs. Well, Casey kind of used these little, I don't know, like little inch wide, 3-inch long, these little wooden shelves and they're like just like trim or something, but they'd stack together and make a perfect rectangle. And then he'd put a lace in it and then box it in, and then he put his blade on it. But he used these little wooden things, and what he would do, and I use this forever when I stretch the other way, is, and you can do it with a screwdriver. I'm sure you've seen other videos, but like once it's dried like that, and like you said, it's all rounded and it's rough. I would always take his wooden jig, because I like using the wood, but I would place it on the strand and put my thumb on it, and then I'd pull the strand down, and I had to walk back on every strand, so that it would smooth it out a little bit more and make it a little more supple, because when it is dried like that, like you said, it is so hard. I mean, it's not even soft strand anymore. It's this hardened strand. So I would go top and bottom on that every strand, which again, that took more time. To have to like soften that up before I can work on it after waiting a day to try, it also took more time, and it did not make a superior product in my opinion. It made an even inferior product. It destroyed my material more than it would have been in the other method. And like I said, that's one of those things where if putting that extra effort would have made a superior product, and it did take a day to dry up, I'll just make it my system change. If doing that did make the stretch better, I would do it, but it doesn't make it better, and it takes more time. And in fact, the fact that you're losing your oils, to me, ruins it. It's not a good way to do it. But there's tons of people still out there doing it, and that's, I'm not saying that they're wrong and I'm right, I'm better, they're not, but from my experience, it is doing these harmful things to your hide and making your process worse. And if it's not benefiting you by either expense, time, or artistical perfection, then you need to let it go and find another method, or you should try other methods, you know, because ultimately we don't want to spend, you know, why make one whip when we can make 3 whips? Right. You know what I mean? If it takes you 3 days to make a whip, the average quote should be that if you're a professional whip maker, you should be able to make a whip a day. But that 6-foot whip, maybe a 6-hour day. That 10-foot whip, maybe a 10-hour day or 11-hour day. It's just like, how long is your day? Yeah. And if it takes you 3 days to make a 6-foot whip, like literally like 3 8-hour session days, you know, you definitely cannot be a professional whip maker. You know, if it takes you 3 days to make a nylon bullwhip, like it literally takes you 18 hours, 20 hours to make a 6-foot nylon bullwhip, you cannot be a professional whip maker, because you can only make like 2 a week, you know, and it's like, it wouldn't be very feasible for you. So you either have to do, to be a professional, you'd have to do something different. You have to improve. Well, you should improve and be faster, but it's like, you know, this is where technique starts coming into play. If you want to be professional, you got to realize you got to get paid for your time. And I don't, and say you sell whip X for $100, no matter what, it only sells for $100. If you spend 3 days to make that 100 or 1 day, you're not going to want to keep making that $100 for 3 days work when you can do it for 1. You need to figure out how to speed up the process. But like I said, if it's not artistically helping the overall appearance, or it's not making it functionally better, you shouldn't reinvent the wheel with all these weird ways to make whips. Now, I do want to encourage you all to explore and be creative and inventive. You know, you guys have different walks of life. Some of you guys play hockey. You know, people suggest use shrink wrap tape or other weird things. It's like, you guys have this stuff in your world, or like the Kevlar thread. We use Kevlar thread public. Man, use that. Try that. You got things in your life that only you see. I don't fly planes like Nick. I've been in 3 planes, but I don't fly planes. There's something he gets from flying that I'm sure helps his whip making in a way that I'll never understand, because that's a part of him that's unique. You guys have this stuff. Try it. But also, like I said, don't just try and be like, well, I tried it once and I thought it was okay, I'm going to do it. Make sure you're going to redo it for good reasons, not just because. You know, like, you know, if it makes a better whip, use it. If it helps you make a better whip, use it. If it just makes you think you make a better whip, man, use it. You know, like, don't be afraid to do different methods and try. Don't be afraid to stop and realize that you need to stop certain methods or utilize more methods. But if it takes you 3 days to make a whip, a 6-foot whip, I'm not, you know, odds are you're a beginner, but even not, that's great. If it takes you 3 days, that's great. Be proud. Enjoy that whip. I'm not slamming you that it takes you 3 days, or like, oh, it makes me only 6 hours to make a 6-foot whip. Then that's great. Keep doing it. All I'm just saying is that when you're trying to, you know, if you are wanting to be professional, you don't have enough time in the world to spend 3 days on a 6-foot whip. You have to change your methods, or figure out how to speed up whatever you can on the process. Even if you can't change your method, you got to learn to systematically make a whip quicker somehow. You know, maybe it's just the way you juggle your time. Learn to get rid of your wasted time. Learn to get rid of your process wasted time. Like one thing, I know a lot of people make whips, and they'll do like, well, I've got I've got 5 whips. Well, I'm just going to make whip 1. So I cut the bellies. I cut the bellies. I build it all. Then I cut the overlay. I braid it. That whip's done. And to me, I'm like, well, that's great and all. And I'm pretty fast because of my methods I use. I can go a lot faster than average people. But I'm like, well, if I got 5 whips, well, I got a whole day of cutting out every one of them. And then I'm like, the next day I'm going to stretch them all, and I'm going to prep them all. And then I'm like, the next day I'm going to start building the cores. Maybe I will just pick one at that point and finish it. But why sit there and cut 1 overlay out a day when you can cut 3 overlays out right in the same sitting, stretch them all at the same time, and heck, prep them all at the same time? Because if you guys start prepping by hand and you're, let's just say you're doing the onion method, you're doing where you have like a 3 belly method, and each belly, instead of a 4-strand belly, which is something we can start talking about maybe later on or something about method, but like when you have a 4-strand belly versus their first belly being a 6-strand, and the next one an 8-strand and a 12-strand, which a lot of these onion or burning method makers, they do it. They make a nylon approach where you have to have more strands for each belly instead of just 4 on the first and 4 on the second, like my method can do. But with all these layers, and it just takes so much more time to make these. I think that's where I was going with it. It takes so much more time to make a 6-strand belly than a 4-strand. There's 2 extra strands. To make an 8-strand second belly compared to a 4-strand second belly, it's twice as many strands. I mean, it's like you're taking more material and more time. To have 8 strands, you're gonna have more waste. Like just alone the waste, you're gonna have more waste. Yeah. Even if you have smaller strands compared to my fat strands, you still have 8 strands, and there's got to be some waste, and you're going to lose waste. So I mean, you're going to waste time and you're going to waste material. And you want to, if you're trying to be a professional, you got to find all these ways to cut corners, speed up your process, and hopefully not bleed a lot of money out like that. But in your own process, you'll make your own decisions. You'll figure out your own balance and what you want to go with this. But methods can play a huge part of whether you can feasibly pull this off. Like I said, it should take a good whip maker about 6 to 7 hours to make a 6-foot whip, give or take. If you're making a fancy handle braid that takes you an hour to braid the handle, it's not going to take 6 hours. It's going to take longer. If you've got some specs you have to hit on a whip, it's going to take longer. Sometimes you got to be like, I want to see a tapered handle. It needs to be 22 millimeters off the knot, and then it better be 20 millimeters right before it hits the transition. Once it's done with the transition, 3 inches down, it needs to be 17 millimeters. And it's like, I got to hit that. So now you got to kind of measure every layer. So like things like that take time. Making a match set, it is a lot longer than making 2 whips. I mean, you really want to match them as much as you can. So there's a lot of check and recheck and pause and move on. You can cut them all, prep them all together, start to braid them all together. But like you've got too many things you have to kind of match up, which really slows down your process, and that affects time or prices too. You got to factor in those things too.
Earlier, you were talking about, when somebody is a beginner whip maker, they'll kind of tend to make a whip and then go, well, I'm going to do that better. And they'll unbraid it, they'll put it back together, and they'll be spending so much attention and they're just looking at everything so closely. And oftentimes, I don't know if you feel the same way, but in other aspects of life, if I look at it too closely and take my time too much, I do a worse job than I would if I just kind of go through it.
Like overthinking it.
Yes, with music. If I'm learning a song, if I'm just learning every single note and playing it really slowly.
But you've never played the whole song once yet. Like you spent an hour getting through the first 2 stanzas, but you've never actually played the whole song crappy yet.
And some people would argue that it's better to just
every step you don't
learn
make a
from the beginning. But it's kind of better to just kind of power through it. If you miss a few notes, it's okay. But still, it's kind of a psychological thing. You made it through that whip. You made it through that song, and then you can go over it and then just kind of start evening those things out.
Yeah, like I have my wife proofread some things every now and again.
Yeah,
and it drives me so crazy to watch her proofread. Like I sit there just gnawing my teeth, regretting I ever let her proofread.
Really?
Because to me, I'm like, here's what I wrote. I like, it's a rough draft. I just put it all out there, read it real quick, and I want you just to read it so you know what I'm saying, and you're like, how did that impact you? And she'll be reading it, and then she pauses every grammatically problem and says, that should be a comma here, and it's like, oh, this thing was like, and I'm sitting here like, it should have took you 3 seconds to read this whole thing. I'm here 5 minutes deep, and you're just telling me the problem. Like, I don't feel like you read this with a rhythm and are getting motivated with what the speech is, and
it's kind of like
the
black ink on the white paper.
We can't even make it through the whole story and then critique it. I had a teacher in school that said, I read it once without caring I just read for content. Then I'll rip you apart with what needs fixed. And I'm like,
Fair enough.
that's a good method,
Yeah.
you know. And it's kind of like that with the whip making you're saying. It's like, you know, these guys will proofread and reproof and edit and re-edit the same whip over and over and over again. But ultimately, you got to figure out what's the phrase you know when to cut bait. It's like, when's enough in this one? Like when I first started making knots, then like my third whip, I already memorized how to make like a 7/6 or something. And Steve's like, how the heck did you do that so fast? I'm like, well, I made it 8 times on my second whip before I got the strand width right, or this right, or then this got cut, or this now. So I'm like, really? Yeah, you're right. It may only be 8 whips deep, but I made that knot like 18 times now. And I mean, and when it comes to knots, definitely do the knot over. Okay, let me rephrase that. Don't redo the whole whip. Don't take the overlay off and resize it unless you really need to. I mean, don't worry about a little gap here. It's part of learning. You're new.
Yeah.
Don't worry about some kinks or some other problems, a bad drop. Like, don't let that stop you from turning in your assignment, boys and girls, all right? But knots, for sure, as my good friend Peter Thorndike, and hopefully you listen, is retie that knot. You know what I'm talking about. You retie that knot. You know, I mean, like, I'll see a knot and there's, like, sinew sticking out the bottom. And a guy puts the whip up like, here it is. Well, the sinew's showing, but I figured I don't care. The knot was tied well enough. And I'm like, look, you know, that's one thing that, I mean, retying that knot or that foundation does not involve unbraiding the whip, taking the fall off, resizing, rebraiding. You're talking about another 20 minutes of your life to 30 minutes just solving an aesthetically monstrous thing that you shouldn't accept for a whip that you buy from someone. Yeah, I get you guys might have little gaps. You're going to have these little kinks and it won't roll out the best. Maybe your taper ain't right. Maybe there's some issues. But it should crack and it's a decent whip. But the wrapping paper, that overlay in the knots is the wrapping paper in the bow.
Yes.
And otherwise you just got a cardboard box full of cat turds at your hands somewhere. I mean, you got to put some wrapping paper on it. And like that knot is a simple fix. I would in a heartbeat be like, oh, look at that. That sucks because I have to redo that. I want to let it pass, you know.
Right.
I mean, but as far as the little things, finish your painting, move on. Don't worry about trying to rebraid the same whip 4 times. You want to do it once, learn your lesson. Do it twice, you better learn it then. But don't keep re-unbraiding these whips for things that you may not even be capable of solving right now. I mean, you're still trying to understand the process. You don't even know what you're looking at or what your desired look will eventually be once you've mastered it. So,
and that's okay, you know.
You're an artist. You're making a craft. It's handmade from natural materials. You are an artist. So Picasso probably hated all of his stuff but 3 items, man. But everybody loves them. So, I mean, don't let that stop you from finishing that painting, giving it as a gift, selling to someone, have fun. Feel good when you finally sell a whip at a nice, good price. You're like, wow, someone actually thought my work was worth that. And that should be another milestone for you as a whip maker to finally be so proud and be like, oh, someone thought that whip was worth $400. And what that should do to you, and if you're a good person at all, you will then put your foot in the stand and say, I owe it to anyone that is a patron of mine. And by patron means support my artistic craft by purchasing a whip to make the best whip in every angle I can. So when I sell it to him, I can sleep well at night and feel good that he got the best I could give him. And not some knot with sinew sticking out because I just thought it looked good enough. You know.
Cosmetically, I think, well, for me, when I see a picture of a whip, my eye goes to 2 places. First the taper, then the knots.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Which is basically all a whip is. Which is the 2 things that make a whip.
Right. But yeah, redoing the knot is definitely worth it.
Yeah, you know, it's such a, you know, like, of course you hate doing it. I mean, if you, like, I won't untie, like, if I tied a knot for a transition or a heel, and then I cut off my lead and, you know, and it's all there, and I roll it, I cannot reuse that strand. And I wouldn't want to reuse the strand on maybe a 2-tone accent because I can't reuse it because one, now that it's trimmed, it's shorter. I can't use it. You can maybe cut it and a certain length or use it for like an accent on another knot, but it's like that strand's in. So I'm looking at, dang it, there's 30 minutes of my time prepping, tying, whatever, and I'm like, and there's at least maybe $10 of Kangaroo I just wasted. And it's like, man, I don't want to lose that time in Kangaroo. But it's like, but I'm giving something to somebody, and no matter, you know, like a wrist loop. I had a wrist loop once, and I think this is one of the, Adam Winrich on my 35th whip. That was a blessing. On my 35th whip around that time, Adam, I forget how I started talking to Adam, but he was talking about it, and he, we talked about, wanting to see some work, and I said, hey, I'd love to get a match to the stock whips. This is about 3 years ago. It really got me a two-handed whip cracking because I was pretty much a bull whip guy and did a lot of single offs, something I didn't use both hands, but I never did double whipping. And I'm like, I really want to set a stock whips. I'd love to get some from you. So he said, yeah, why don't you make me an 8-foot whip? And I think it's on his GoPro special. You see him walk in there into his RV or where he lives in, and he picks up a bag of whips, and there's a black whip on top.
Yeah,
that's my whip right there. That's like my
Nice.
number 35 or something, and or maybe it's 40. It's something's really early off. And he liked whipping up. I've since then have traded a lot of whips with Adam, and he's bought a lot for me. But like on that 35th whip, I just tied the wrist loop on, and I finally got done. And this was an uphill battle. Like I think I made him a whip. And then he wanted it taper different because I was still trying to understand things. And I was very happy at how I was making him at 35. Don't get me wrong. I've been very blessed with it. But, he came back with comments like, I want the overall taper to taper faster. I want this to happen here or do that there. So he gave me some really great pointers, helped me out a lot. But on that 35th whip, I got done. And you got to realize this is after he turned the first one just because he said I'd like these improvements on it. And I realized after I had it all done, it looked really good as far as I could tell at my 35 whip level. But I realized that one of my wrist loop strands were flipped upside down. And I'm like, how did I break? My black and small strands. Like, how did I do that? And I'm like, and a part of me was just like, well, he returned the first one. How about, what? I'm just going to send it so when he goes ahead and deep sixes this one, I'll be like, oh, well, now I'll cut the knot off or use it. I'll make him another one, or I'll just buy a stock whips, And then that part of me was just like, I could do that. But I'm like, you know what? Because I really don't want to ruin now, not only my wrist loop, I have to ruin my knot strand. I'm like, I'm looking at $35 or 30 a skin. I'm talking about all this time to cut and prep and make it. But it's like you have to do it. It's just retie the knot. It's like I had to do it. And I put it on, and he loved the whip. He eventually sold it. He's got more since then, but he eventually sold that whip. But that was on that GoPro video, and he liked it well enough. And it's like that one strand would have been a sign that I don't care. That one strand would have showed that let's just say this. He doesn't know I consciously did it. That means I'm so unaware of my work that I didn't even notice it was there. That's another signal it could give you. That it's so incompetent, I didn't even notice I flipped that strand. Every now and again, you'll braid leather and it's dark and it's night and you might have a flip here and there.
And black.
Yeah, and like brandy too. It's like especially when you're talking about like 3 millimeters, you get something really thin, or 2.5, it'll flip and you can't even tell the difference sometimes when the lighting's not right or whatever. But it's like, but at that moment, I changed it, I sent it to him, everything worked out really great. And if I wouldn't have done it, for all I know, that one little strand could have been enough to be like, well, the guy's learning, but I can't accept that. So always make it as good as you can. And if you are making it for somebody that you respect or you've heard about in the community, it's not like you make them a better whip than anyone else, but take a little more time with that. And I would dare say that make a whip and within, like, say it is Adam especially, or like you're getting to Loop Rollins or somebody like I've got to get something to Loop, or Anthony. You're going to give them a whip for the first time and you want to impress them. You make one with the intention that that's the prototype for the next one you're going to make afterwards to make it better for them. Or just take your time. Like, really go slow for these whips that are really going to maybe change your life in the whip world. Like if I would, I tended to when I sent something to Paul or Joe the first few times or whatever, I just made a whip and I knew it would have problems, but I just sent it to them. I'm like, I'm not going to sit here and wait till I make a great whip for them to see. And it's like, this is me, who I am. This is my expression. This is my artistical expression in this moment. Here you go. Now tell me how it's bad, or what you do differently, or what can you tell me? And it is good to do that. Like I was okay with that. But there's also a time where if I know I was giving a whip to someone that I've never met before, somebody that I have high regard to, or even just new customer, I would not want to give them something subpar. That's why every now and again you'll see like some really good deals on my in-stock page. Something happened on it. Maybe it came up short an inch because maybe I had some strands break right when I was tying on the fall hitch, or maybe something did come out in a certain diameter that I needed to hit for them. So I immediately threw it to the side and remade a whip and then brought that out there, But, it's like, go for the effort to make the best you can. You surely do that at all times. Like, you'll get a customer that, and you may get this customer and think, oh, he bought a whip and, I'm not too concerned because, I'll probably never sell a whip to him again anyways, whatever. But it's like, it turns out that one customer isn't just one customer. He may buy, like I've had customers turn around and buy 8 whips within 5 months. I even had to tell them to slow down. Like, hey, buddy, you've got this very expensive, what I call a crack habit. Like, this crack habit is more expensive than the real crack habit.
Right.
Just as addictive. And I'm like, as your local physician, I need to tell you that I think you have a habit and you need to slow down. I've done this to customers. I'm like, are you sure you can afford these whips? I don't know another whip maker in the world that would stop their customers and be like, look, I'm going to talk to you.
Right.
Are you sure you can afford this? Because I'm starting to worry about you bought some from me.
Yeah.
You got 3 from Peter this month. You got 2 from that guy. And like, you're buying 3 from... Look,
You're already
can you
up to $2,000.
Yeah, can you afford this? Like,
Yeah.
look, I love you, brother, you know, and... You know, but it's like you'll get a guy like that. Next thing you know, it's like because you did so good on whip, he may turn around. You don't even know what he's about to do, and then you'll find a customer that maybe it's like Andrew. You guys, you've heard the disciple Andrew, you know, the original 12 disciples.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
You ever hear Andrew? You know who Andrew is or what he did?
I forgot.
You know why? Because he doesn't have a book in the Bible, right? But he was a connector. Andrew brought Peter to him and James. Imagine Jesus without Peter and James. Might have been someone else that would have fulfilled God's role, but it's like he was a connector. So like you'll get a customer that may only buy one whip, but he'll bring you 10 friends.
Yeah.
And he's influential on like Facebook or other things. And be like, we're a whip, he'll be a guy to type for you. Be like, try Trinity Whip Co. Try NicksWhipShop. Yeah. And it's like, so give your best to every customer because you never know who this person is. You know, what could really happen if you gave them their best. So you need to treat everything, I wouldn't say treat everything like it's an exhibition or it's 8 Mile Rabbit and you got to step up right now and you got one shot, but you should kind of look at it like every chance I can, I need to give my best product because I have no idea what's going to happen once it's out the door. You know, it could be somebody ripping you apart in a YouTube video. You don't know what you're going to get, but you know, it's like you'll do better to give them your best because it comes back to you.
I think that's something that holds us accountable as whip makers. Like I remember Steve Townsend. I was talking about this with him, and he was saying, you know, you never know who you're going to send. Yeah. You don't know who's getting this whip. You know, it could be a 20-year veteran whip maker, or it could be somebody who's just getting one for the first time. And regardless of who it is, of course, you should be, you know, putting your all into it. But you know, you don't know who's going to get the whip. Yeah.
Yeah, he's. I love Steve. He gets on himself. He's like a super perfectionist. Like that's one reason why I know he is good and he's going to be great. Probably better than me for that reason because he is so very like there can be perfection. I do. You know, where's the perfection and you know. But you know, it's a lot of wisdom that you know. He's definitely always trying to make it like I want to make sure you get the best and I want to make them better for you. And you know that is huge. It's true. You don't know who's going to get what's going on. And like let's just say you. And here's the problem too: when you get these people who never had a whip, and they'll come to you, and you got to realize at that one moment, like to me, that's the golden thing right there. If someone chose you for their first whip, man, that is special, and you guys need to value him like the veteran that's bought 20 from you.
Yes,
he may never buy another whip, but it doesn't matter. You get to be that person in his heart for the rest of his life. He'll talk about that whip from Nick, you know. So it's like be there for that. And with this though, with the guy never having a whip, you could have all the flaws you want. Because I'll tell you, I doubt he's going to notice it, just like I didn't notice my first 200 whip. The average guy who hasn't seen a whip has no idea what he's looking at or what he needs to make it a better whip. He has no idea. He doesn't know what plat count is. He probably doesn't even look for gaps. Like he'd notice an obvious gap, but he may not even notice there are gaps in it. He may not even notice that it's chunky, like it goes thick and small because it's like either the internals are bad or the braiding's crap.
Balance.
It's all this stuff. Like they don't know. Yeah. They have no idea on this first whip if it's a good whip, if it's a crappy whip, if it's the greatest whip known to man. It's like they don't know that. So you could get away with it like, that's all right. It's not that great, but he won't know any difference, and that's cool. It's good enough for a first guy. You could take that attitude, but again, it's like you don't know what it's going to. Not that I would do that to a first-time customer. I'm just saying it's like you still shouldn't take where you could take that liberty. You still shouldn't. You know,
absolutely.
And because in somebody, and here's another reason why these first-time whip crackers. They're excited. Like they finally get a whip and they can finally crack it. They're about to do a lot of damage with whoever's whip they got. To be like, I just got this from Nick. Where'd you get the whip? I got it from Nick, man. Who'd you say? I said Nick. Like, you talking about Nick again? Yeah, I'm talking about Nick. I got his whip right here. You want to see him on YouTube? You know, it's like they're going to be excited and share it with everyone.
Yes. Yeah.
You know.
You're right. Yeah, and going back on, you know, beginner whip makers. There's a lot of really valuable groups out there online, like the Whip Makers Hook. It's a place where you can, for the first time, make a whip, put it out there, and it's getting exposed. It's getting exposure to, you know, different whip makers. You know, to you, to Adam Winrich, to
there's a lot of good people on the site. There's a lot of amateurs on there too. There's there's a lot of people that sit there and help answer your questions, or because they've already gone through your stumbling blocks if you're new to it. Yeah, it is a great group. The Whip Makers Hook. I wish there were more out there. I know there's if you guys are trying to find other groups to learn, just type in stuff like on Facebook groups like leather braiding. Mighty Turk Head is one where they just do a lot on Turk Heads knots, but you can see a lot of cool stuff in there. I have 3 Facebook pages right now. One's called The Whip Community. And that's just, but that one's just all about people finding people in the area or setting up whip meets. So there are like no posts on there unless you can somehow link it to hanging out with some dude with a whip. Like if you could be like, I was cracking this with Nick Schrader, it works because it's more than one person meeting together doing something whip related. As long as you can, link it to me. But it's all for people to hopefully learn how to set up whip meets or to help with whip meets or to help meet others in the area. I have another one called like the Whip Trading Community, which you can buy, sell, trade whips. But I have one called the Whip Cracking Community, which really isn't like a whip maker's hook. It's just anything went by whip cracking. I was going to make a whip making group, but the hook's already up there, and I wasn't really into it. Yeah. I've got a couple secret groups on Facebook though, where it's just a closed group of my close friends where we do kind of talk about whip making. But I'm not trying to be an elitist. It's just this isn't an open door thing. It's me and friends that trust each other where we really share what we got going on and not afraid to pull out the bad and the good. Not that I'm afraid to let anyone know some of my bad, my good, because that's how people are. They're both. Anybody that only talks about being aces full in their hand, man, they're just lying. Everybody has good moments, bad moments, but it's like I thought about getting another public group, but like you said, the Whipmaker's Hook is probably one of the best ones out there, especially for novice nylon and leather and all this stuff. I just didn't really see a reason to reinvent the wheel. And, but yeah, there are a lot of good Facebook groups out there. It's good to talk to other people and it's a good way to find some other people. Like there's a lot of people out there that I sell whips to that don't even get on internet or Facebook. You got a lot of old time guys.
Yeah. They'll send you a check.
So sometimes I try to find people that are looking for people in the area and I try to hook them up with my other customers that don't. I'll be like, hey, I think I know 3 people in the Jersey area. Give me a minute. Then I'll call them up. I'll be like, hey guys, got this guy trying to find people's area. Can I give him your information? And he was like, yeah, I do that. And then I'll try to help that out. But as far as making, there are a lot of YouTube's NicksWhipShop. You guys should check that out. I'm sure you have if you're on the Whipcast. Nick is, but he's got a lot of good ones. Bernie has some old ones. He passed away, but he still has a lot of those going for a while. I don't know if they're indefinite. I think he paid for like a 3-year run and then they're gone. So if you get a chance, you should watch all the Bernie videos while you can. Not that I'm a big fan of everything he did in there, but they're going to be gone one day because when his time is up for whatever he paid for, it's up. So definitely get a hold of there. What else? Really, if you're wanting to get into whip making, the best advice I would give you is find other whips or people that have whips. Find other whip makers and people that you think you can get a connection with, an honest connection where they seem like a human being to you and get along with. Ask away. Be kind to them and respectful. Because they got to put up with a lot of patience with you answering all the same old silly basics to you over and over again. So just be kind and thankful and let them know how much it means to you. Find a guy you have a connection. Definitely talk to them. If you can visit a whip maker, I don't even care how new or crappy of a whip maker they are, like how bad they are. It would be beneficial to run into them and just see what they're doing in the operation. From whatever you watch in your videos, since apparently this is the first time you met another whip maker, whatever you watch in your videos, whatever he's doing, you're gonna either realize your methods or what you're doing you like better or are better, or you're gonna learn some new tricks. Even if he makes a worse whip, you may find tricks from him that you never even thought about that could help you out too. So, but I would definitely say if you're wanting to get into whip making, find someone to shadow. Because there are 6 billion of us on this planet, and we all see things differently with different walks of life and different experiences. And we all have, generally there are similar questions we'll all have in different categories, but we all have different learning blocks and learning disabilities and specific questions that we have to have answered for us to really succeed or move on. And they're as varied as our hair and our skin color. So you got to have someone you can actually talk to and maybe see in front of you, and it'd be a lot easier to answer it. I remember having Casey. He's telling me about a snake whip core that he was making. and it's basically just a triangle piece with, I guess, what you'd call the top, where it comes out the top of the fat part of the triangle is kind of like a T shape, like a cross. And he was trying to explain to me how he did it, and then he folded it over like a cross, and it was over the phone. I had no physical thing to look at. And he kept talking about folding the 2 sides and the 3rd side, but I could not figure out this 4th side where he's like, where's it across? It's right there though. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And then he showed me a picture. I'm like, oh yeah, the actual shot bag is the fourth corner of the cross.
Go
but
on.
like for like 20 minutes, I'm like, I can't understand it.
Yeah.
I can't wrap my brain. I'm like,
Visual
I
is
had to have a
important.
visual aid, or I had to have, it's like, so it's good to have someone in front of you to actually ask, because as much as you can hear on a video or as much as you can talk on a phone, it's like to be able to see it so you can show them with your hands or paper and draw it. Like, this is what I don't get. Explain this to me. You know? It's worth the world to you, no matter how good or bad they are. You'll learn something,
Absolutely.
Plus, hopefully, some camaraderie. Maybe you find a new friend.
Oh yeah, just being in the presence of someone else who's a whip maker. I mean, it's such a rare thing relative to everything else. Like,
We're doing our best to change that.
Yeah, we are. We definitely are. But, yeah. So you got a bunch of newer videos that you've been putting up on your YouTube channel. You got some tutorials on there. You got some just different whip cracking videos and instruction. Talk about that. What's the name of your channel?
You know what? I don't even know.
I think it's just Blake Bruning. I've thought it was...
I know it might be Blake Bruning, Bruning.
Yeah.
But a lot of them might say Trinity Whip Co, like Trinity Father Son Holy Ghost Whip, and then Co for company. But if you, it might
I'll put
be,
the name in the
It might be
title.
a Trinity Whip Co channel. I don't remember, guys. I just have my phone app, and whenever I'll film it and upload it. But yeah, it's either Trinity Whip Co or it's Blake Bruning. I think several years ago when I first started making whips, I said, I'll put some basic tutorials, because a lot of people ask about how do you crack a whip, and I thought my take on those on how to feel the whip, not really watch the whip, but feel the whip, was something I didn't really see enough people. I've never really saw anyone talk about, and I thought that was helpful. And then time went by, and I didn't really put anything on there. And then I forget what started spurring it on. But I started thinking that there's some things I wanted to see. It might have had to do with some just some conversation with other people. But I'm like, that's why I started one series that I called the whip making points of light and understanding the how to have the whip maker's eye. I need to probably actually make them specific sub channels so it's easier to organize. Right now they're just all one big playlist, but those are really good because I show some different whips that aren't just mine. I show some of mine, but I'm trying to have that series help novice whip makers to see what they're looking at, and also just whip crackers to actually see kind of what they're looking at, so when they actually get a whip, they can actually appreciate it that much more. It's kind of like when I did martial arts and I finally started getting years into it and understood what I'm really doing. It's like, you used to love martial art movies, and then you go back and watch them, like, this stuff's crap. I can't believe I thought this was an awesome movie.
Right.
And then you when you're trained and then you see a movie, it's like, wow, that really just destroyed its credibility. But then you'll find a really good one, and you'll be like, wow, that training actually made me realize that was an awesome movie, not just because it is cinematic, but they use real stuff. So, whip making's very similar, in that regard. It can kind of play that same game.
Here's your YouTube channel. It's Blake Bruning, and that's your Trinity Whips. Your video. Here you go, right there.
There it is. I guess it is just the Blake Bruning channel, but you can see my logo, Trinity Whip Company.
Yeah. A lot of great videos. I've pointed a lot of people who are interested in learning how to make.
Yeah, the Whip Maker's Eye was definitely that series on that, trying to let the average person to see what's going on more, so they understand how to maybe see how to do a plat count, what the overall taper should look like.
Yeah.
How whips should look. And then I launched another series. I've been in martial arts like 24 years, 25, maybe it's 26. It's getting up there.
Wow.
But I've been teaching for over 20 of them. And with that, I didn't do, like, I've done Jeet Kune Do, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Wing Chun, Filipino Kali, Muay Thai, boxing. I had 3 boxing coaches, 2 Muay Thai coaches. I originally started with karate, and then I did some praying mantis and dragon kung fu before some others. I mean, I've done a lot of gambit through the years. But with the martial art training, even though I did some Kali, none of the guys I trained with used whips, although a Filipino Kali does use, there's a spade dagger, but there's also a whip. They do some whip forms. And so, using a whip with the same training. So I put together another series recently, how I would defend myself with a whip if I had to. And that's a really cool series. If you guys want to check that on how to defend yourself with a whip. Again, I'm not trying to make you card-carrying whip holders that got to register the whip and, go out and fight crime. But it's like, if you did have a whip and I had to use it, it's kind of my take on what you should be looking at as your primary targets, how you should be moving the whip around and why, and realize that it's a very short amount of time. Even if action did happen, it's very fleeting. But that's a really good series. That's actually, some of those got a lot of views for that reason, and it's because I would say it's the right, my take on it, but the right Filipino basic approach, but with a whip. You know, like Anthony Longas has this really nice demo where he kind of covers basically what that is, like Filipino martial arts, but with all the aspects of how you could use a whip. And from, you know, getting close to tying up to the loop to making it like a nunchuck or a flail or all this other stuff. And it's phenomenal how he puts it together. Like, it really is a nice piece when he puts on his little, I call it his quick seminar or his quick promo. I don't know what he calls it, but it's kind of like he does it regularly at different performances. He does a certain, like, he has a certain shtick of what he's going to do, although
he's going to actually be at the 2018 Los Angeles.
I hate to miss that. I'd love to run into him again, or run into him. And but with that, so like that series was all based on how to use the whip. But then the first 3 videos were talking about how you want to get used to cracking a little bit differently than you have. And then I actually have one of my old black belts come in, and then I put a motorcycle helmet on him. Or a face shield. I don't think I have a motorcycle, but a face shield like we use in certain training. Then I had him wear a leather coat, and then I had him have a glove on his hand and hold a knife. And some of that was showing you how I would crack the hand, immediately crack the face, like pop, pop, and different strategies. And then I kind of build in a little bit more explanation, like what if he rushed you? Because while you're keeping him back at bay, he's going to find his moment, rush in on you. Mm-hmm. And I know that not just because of common sense, because I have seen this stuff in my life when people are getting in fights and they pull a chain out and start swinging it around, and you got to do or die and run in there. I've seen that stuff, and trust me, it's the same thing with everyone faced with that. They freeze, and then they figure out, I've got to do this. I'm just going to try to time the right time, and it ain't going to take long before you make that determination. Otherwise, you're sitting there while they come in and hitting you, and you got to react fast. So a lot of that was based more on like, here's how you crack it. Here's my first targets, but at any time this is going on, he could always charge me to tackle me or wail on me or punch me or try to do this to me. And so I just kind of really did a very brief intro on that. There's more you could do, but it's not really that needed. But I thought that was a really nice series to pop out there as well. And then I kind of revisited the basics. I didn't make whips for years because there's a guy named, I don't know if anyone's heard of him, Adam Rinrich or something like that.
Something like that. He does like the two-handed stuff.
I don't know, dude. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. But there's a guy named Adam Rich, and he if you're here, you've watched his videos probably, but he's already got so many great basics on there, and he probably has the biggest work on YouTube as far as how to crack with the more intermediate and advanced routines as well. And so I made my first few videos based on the basics to the basics. Mm-hmm. And then these, I decided, you know what, I'm going to do a series on the basics of the fundamentals. And so I kind of did my fundamentals and my own take on it. But I also stopped to a point on even the double-handed I put on there, because I'm like, well, you want all these other stuff, like you want to do the headhunter, you want to do, all these other stuff. You go to, just go to Adam's. He's already done it. I don't need to reinvent it. I'm not trying to reinvent. Yeah, I'm not trying to watch his videos and then copy it. But I did do a good re-fundamental. Like, I redid the fundamentals my own way, to kind of help a lot of people out there. And again, a lot of that was just requests. Like, people ask, I'm like, you know what? It's like, I've got 3 days. I'm like, here, honey, talk to my daughter, like, film me and I'll do something for you for now. I just film and I'll just burn a bunch of these out so that I can get them up there,
You recently got your wife into target whipping, didn't you?
Well, it was a brief courtship, and then it was over. She
the videos, man, she was doing pretty good. After a few minutes.
I can't imagine watching that from like someone else's perspective. I wish I almost could, but she, it's like the funniest thing about what I love about my wife is that it's the same thing that we have problems with. We are so polar opposite in everything we do. Like, I'm more extrovert in ways, she's more introvert. It's like just the way we do everything. It's like I never expected anyone in the world that I would ever met would ever appreciate or like anything that I liked or would ever want to do any of the things I want to do. And I made that early in my life because I like martial arts, I like skateboarding, I like all this other stuff. I'm like, I never expect anyone to know what I'm doing, care what I'm doing, even understand why I'm doing it or what potentially, because like no one can relate with me. So I'm like, I'm always the odd, in my own mind, I'm like, I'm odder than everyone else, which believe me, if you guys get to know me, you'll really find out that I am a little bit of an oddball. I'm strange in my own right, but like, I never expect anybody to do this. So I never worried about like, well, I did martial arts. My girl, it's like, I'm a farmer. My kids better be farmers. It's like, I know better than that. My dad was a farmer. And to try to explain to a farmer that I want to be a martial arts instructor, not that I exactly had this conversation, but I know how to play down. What do you want to do, son? I want to teach martial arts. Uh-huh. It's like, where's your product? How do you make money? It's like, well, they come in and they just pay me to spend time with me as I give them confidence and courage and help them strive to be a better you. It's like you got no product, kid. You're going to be a failure, And it's not that you had that conversation, but it's like, it's like it's easy to see it. So it's like I don't expect my kids to like martial arts. I don't expect my kids to like whips. I don't expect anyone to skateboard.
Right.
Not that I skateboard anymore. It's like I don't expect people to love chess. Any of the things I love, I don't really expect it. And so my wife really is that person to where she married me because I don't care for anyone to care for what I like. So I got exactly that. I got a woman that doesn't care about any of the things I do. Like I love recurve archery, and like this is an example of this is a typical example, and this is a true story. So like they were gone for a week, which is rare. They went to go visit her grandmother's in like southern Indiana, and so it was cold outside. I'm like, they're gone. No one's in this house, and I'm like, I've got about 9 meters, so I put my archery stand in front of my bookcase, and I have in between one hallway to the kitchen. I just step back, shoot at night. It's like I'm home. I got done working and teaching. I'm just gonna nail it from 9 meters away all day long, or I guess you call it 9 yards or whatever,
Yeah.
And so I was just nailing it in, and then they got home, and all the kids are in bed, and I mean I'm not shooting arrows in a house with kids that are running around, And then they're on to bed, and my wife's in bed. I mean it's like super late, and I could hear if my kids are around. It's not like I'm just shooting blindly through the house to 2 rooms, And then I'm like, you know what? It's like I've been stuffing candles out whips. I'm like, I'm gonna put a candle up. And I'm going to try to shoot it out with an arrow.
Flame, yeah.
I'm only 9 yards away, though, right? Indoors. Yeah. So I put a candle up. First one, thwack. Perfect. Arrow's right on top of it. Second one, thwack. I'm like, and so she's in the bedroom, laying on her bed. I mean, just like relaxed, like she's watching TV, but she's just reading a book, just sitting there. And I just exuberantly come in, and they're like, guess what I just did? I'm like, she's like, yeah. And I'm like, I just shot out some candles with an arrow. And she's just looking up her book like, yeah, anything else? It's like nothing else. No, okay, yeah, that's great for you. Okay, see you later. It's like it's the epitome of what it's like.
It's like you had to be there.
It's like it didn't even matter. Like to me, I'm like, isn't that so awesome? She's like, yeah, it's great.
It just kills your spirit when somebody.
My buddy Rabid Rab came and he said, and he heard that story. He's like, that's where you immediately say to her, maybe you didn't hear what I just said. I just shot out a candle with an arrow.
Yeah.
But it's like that's a nutshell of everything. With how I do with everything in whip. So she was never really into whip cracking. I got her to do it once, like 10 years ago or 8 years ago. She did it once and she hit herself. It's like, I got hurt. I ain't doing that again. And then years later, maybe 4 or 5 years later, she doesn't really drink, but I think she had, a little drink in there, so she's a little more relaxed. And so we were walking to my parents and I was cracking whips. She's like, yeah, why not? I'm bored. I'll just give me a whip. And she started cutting leaves off. So she spent maybe a total of 3 hours and 10 years training before I shot that video.
Wow.
And then the day before I got her cracking a little bit and I had her like crack something like we're going to film it. And I finally got her pushed to film it. But yeah, I had her cutting those pretzels and that was fun, It was really, like, I love watching the video. Like, I'm not a fan of really watching I have become more of a fan of watching myself in videos because I'm trying to understand how can I do it better. But I'm not really a fan of watching myself, but I cannot stop watching that video when I'm bored or I'm out. I love the fact that I can pop up my YouTube and I get to watch my wife in a moment where we were actually just having fun.
Isn't it
was
great?
Captured, and I don't even need to be at my computer with it. Like, I can get on YouTube anywhere.
Yeah.
And I like that about it. And we had a little bit of fun doing that. And the throwing them at the end was the best. Like, she actually hit like 4 out of like 8 of those. And I got like 20 feet back, and I threw them like a baseball. Like, I just threw them like Ninja Star baseball right at her. So I was like, good. And she was actually kicking them. Like to toss them out. I was like, that's pretty impressive. Now, don't get me wrong, the thrower had to be pretty good, but she was nailing it. It was awesome.
At the cracker.
Yeah, like when I tossed them to her, she had all 10 for 10. She snapped every one of those. And then, I was just like, that's freaking impressive. And she was just so great with it. I was just like, you hit all them. She's like, yeah. She's like, yeah, pretty cool, right? And she didn't mean it like she's being cocky. She's like, yeah.
She really loved it all her life.
Well, it's not like she was doing it to be cocky. Like, yeah, I was great. It's like, she was like, yeah, it's pretty cool, right? It's like genuine, like, yeah, it was pretty cool. Like,
and that's the way it is with most people. Like, I went down to Florida with my mother and my aunt. I don't know if you saw that video. It was a little vlog that I made. And I taught my 74-year-old aunt how to crack a whip.
That's awesome.
And she did great. My cousins that I hadn't seen in a while, they... I showed them how to do it, and they loved it.
Yeah, to be able to break that sound barrier, it does something to people. I think that Steve uses that as his logo. It's like the speed. What is it? The speed of sound in the palm of your hand. Yeah, I think that's what he came up to. Yeah. It is. Look what that does for somebody to make that crack, and this is why I can't express enough why. When you teach someone new, teach them how to do the cattleman's crack. I sometimes call it the circus crack. Yeah. Just because it's how I heard it first years ago. I'm trying to correct myself that out. But it is also called the circus crack, but it's called cattleman's. But you teach them a cattleman's. They don't have to do anything else. With a cattleman's crack established within 10 to 15 minutes, you can now have them cut targets, cut leaves, try to snuff out candles. Even if this person spins 100 times, they'll eventually snuff out one candle. And even if they don't, They don't care. They will crack it 100 times just trying to get that
Yes.
flame out. And I love the first session I work with someone. I show them what to do. I give them a few reps one way, a few reps another way. Then I have them crack it. And within 15 minutes from the initial start, we put them on candles. And when
Yeah.
they finally snuff out that candle,
that
the first day they
feeling.
crack,
Yeah.
I'll turn and look at them and be like, how'd that feel? And they all do the same thing. They just sit there like, I gotta tell you, that felt really good. It's
Yeah.
like, that felt amazing. I'm like, all right.
Cracking whips, putting out candles, as well as making whips. It's just it's a very satisfying feeling, creating that art. I remember a video that Bernie made. He said something along the lines of, whip making, you're not going to get rich off of it, most likely, but it's very satisfying,
Yeah.
And I found that to be quite true.
I'd like to think that anybody that majors in their career, there was a calling there that got nurtured. Like there was a calling for them to do it. Without passion, I used to think that anybody can get good at anything they want to do. It doesn't matter how much limitations or how bad they are. Of course, a complete quadriplegic isn't probably going to surf well,
Right.
but I'm just saying, like it doesn't matter how smart you are if you are missing an arm. I mean, it's like you could literally overcome any obstacle and find your own way to do it. I mean, there's people out there with cerebral palsy doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu. There's different people that have handicaps, but they still make it work. It's like that's okay. But I just think that anybody had the potential to be good at anything they want.
Mm-hmm.
But I've changed my stance. I still believe that, but you got to have the most important element is you have to be passionate about it. Because if you're not passionate about it, you will not get good. If your kids aren't having fun, they will not playing piano. They will stop playing piano. The teacher is more important than what you're learning. This is something I've learned. Is it's better to find, like, you want your kids to learn music. I know they want to play guitar, but you need to find the best teacher that will teach them the love of music. And when time comes, they can learn a guitar. But if you give them a great guitar teacher that sucks at being a teacher but is great at guitar, they're going to have frustration. They're going to hate it. The teacher is more important. So there should be a passion there. And if you don't have that passion, you're not going to get better. So I told Nick earlier, like, practice makes perfect, right? And that's my usual trap. I'm like, yeah, it does.
I'm like, yep.
Nope, only perfect practice makes perfect. And without that passion, you can sincerely do something bad over and over again and never get better. Like, just because you make a whip doesn't mean you made it any better. And sometimes I'll make these phrases, and don't get me wrong, like when people that watch your videos and Bernie's videos, and I heard me say it, that I'm not saying it out of anger or meanness or anything, but I kind of have a term for the people that watch the videos and then make whips. And my term is just called copy and pasters. Now, it's not an insulting thing, and I want to elaborate, because you ever hear me say, why. What I call them the leather burning copy and pasters, or the Nick nylon copy and pasters. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not to be an insulting term. What I'm just saying is, you watch this 6-foot video, and then you copy and paste. You're like, okay, it's just what she did. He made it for you to give it to you like this. Like, you need a strand this long. You need 12 strands this long. You need a nail spike like this. There's nothing wrong with that. But the thing is, when you see these new whips, like, you can always tell if it's a Nick Schrader classic, because anytime somebody puts it on the hook, like, here's my latest bull whip, it'll look exactly like that whip he made on the video. And I call them copy and pasters, not to be derogatory, not to insult it, but that just kind of explains the process. And the thing is, you could copy and paste the same video for your next 50 whips. But even if Nick tried to, we talked about this earlier, try to copy and paste the same whip, like, even if you try to make the same whip and you cut everything out back to back and you braid them, there's something's going to be different. No matter how much you try, something will be different. No matter, even if your same formula, cut to a T, something's thicker, something's thinner, something's not working right here, something got bound on them. I mean, nothing comes out the same. So even trying to match it, even if you think, you can kind of call nylon a little bit more of the science and less art, and I usually call leather, the least way I do leather is like, it's more art than science. And
freehanding versus coloring.
You're working with all your meat. It's like a sculptor dealing with it. And like, not that nylon doesn't have that. Nylon takes a lot of art to make a very nice nylon whip. There's a lot of artistic skill, but I just mean that there's a little more science, because, as Nick pointed out, it's like, well, you have strands already cut at certain widths, so you really have to have your math down. Like, if you want to make a 7/6 Turk head knot, and you put it on there and it doesn't look right, odds are you can't change the strand. You need to change how fat your heel nut is. So there's a lot more math that you need to solve to make what you got fit, while I could just make a thicker strand or a thinner strand, right? I could do other things to compensate. You can't. So, but with this, he's copy and paste. Like I said, even if you copied and pasted his whip, it'll pretty much look like it when you're done, but it can't be exactly like it. And even if Nick, if you did it, it's still if you watch your video, I dare you to do that. You watch your video, you try to do what Nick said 6-7 years ago and try to make that work. I think that'd be hilarious. And you should film yourself. You should film yourself watching your own video.
I don't want to do that. That's a terrible idea.
I know you don't want to, but do it anyways and see how close it comes. But it's like, there's going to be variations.
Right.
You still can't copy and paste it perfect. So that's what I mean by practice doesn't make perfect.
Yeah.
Only perfect practice. So you can practice making that video of Nick's and copy and paste all day long,
Mm-hmm.
but you won't get any better if you just copy and paste every detail. You got to copy and paste to make something, and you got to do it for a while to make something. But what I'm saying is you got to start taking liberties and seeing how you want to fix it in the way you want,
Mm-hmm.
and not just completely copy and paste. There's nothing wrong with copy and pasting. There's nothing wrong with you doing it to start off. But if you're going to grow, you got to change. Now, everything in life, the only thing that's constant in life is change.
Mm-hmm.
Now, without change, nothing, you have to have change to improve. Not all change is beneficial, but without change, nothing improves. So
Yeah.
you got to try some new things, and you got to recognize whether it was good or not and add it or leave it.
A lot of times people will ask me in comments on videos, "Hey Nick, can I use this? Can I do that? Can I take different size ball bearings and taper them in a core?" And I always say, when I haven't tried it, I like to just make it clear. I've never tried that, but don't let that stop you from trying it.
I've heard
just
that.
because
It's
Nick
great.
didn't, do it. You do it, man. You explore that new territory. It's probably, if it's a great idea, yeah, I'll start doing it and give credit to you. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah, no,
experiment, man.
Yeah, we'll call it. What's your name, Jimmy? We'll call it the Jimmy. And now
Yeah,
now when I
exactly.
make my next 6-foot tutorial, when
Jimmy
the comes up, I'm like, this technique's called the Jimmy.
Yeah.
Jimmy 7'6" at Hooters told me, whatever the tag is, told me this. Yeah. I mean, I do the same thing. I've done it in my martial arts career too. I'm like, I would teach these seminars on how to get up off the ground 3 seconds flat.
Yeah.
Because you got to get up and be ready for the next person. You can't just roll on the ground.
Yeah.
And I always just like, here's what I'm going to show you. Here's how to circumvent it. And I'm like, if you can find a better way, show it to me. And I'll teach it and I'll add it to my segment. And I will always tell for the rest of my life as I go around teaching people, Nick Schrader showed me this tip. I did everything but that. He showed me that. I like that forever. This is credited to Nick. Like, yeah, by all means, man, have that open-minded to accept and change and grow. I think that's the hard thing. Like you got to be ready to, I doubt you'll ever see anything out there when you start making whips. You've been there for a while to where it completely changes your foundation of understanding, where you think, what have I been making this whole time? It's like I'm not even making a whip. But there'll be subtle things that you'll want to try, and you need to try to get different and try new things. Maybe you go back to it, but if you don't try it, you don't learn what you need to learn so that you're better. Like, even if you don't even want to do that again, you now know what that did and what it could do. Maybe it'll come in later, maybe it won't. Maybe it just re-illustrates why you're already doing what you're doing is right. But don't be afraid to try something new. Now, I wouldn't take a new order from Adam Winrich, or if Anthony got one, or somebody else that's like really high up, or if I got a movie deal. I wouldn't use that time to experiment, okay, guys? What I'm talking about is when you have downtime or down orders, or if you're just making them for fun, that's the time to experiment. I would not do a lot of experimenting with a paid
With an order, yeah,
That's
exactly.
why usually I'll sell something. I'll be like, well, this was a prototype. Doesn't mean it's bad. It just means, well, I did some things out of the box, or I tried new things, or I made a whole new whip, like a saber whip. Those were complete prototypes,
Yeah.
but these are a prototype, and I can explain, well, there's nothing wrong with this, but this turned out this way, or it's like, this is a unique thing. This is a prototype. So, don't make a prototype for an order, because the guy, theoretically, if he bought something from you, has seen your work. He sees the whip he wants. He's buying that whip just in different colors. It needs to come out like that whip, not a whole nother device,
Exactly.
I don't quibble about a millimeter or two. Oh, no, it's 26 millimeters. It's like, well, I'd rather be 22, 24, 23. But, oh, well, it's 26, man. Big deal. Don't freak out.
Yeah.
Send it to the dude. It's as long as the taper's still good to the bottom, it'll all work out right,
Yeah. There was a time where I had a whip order, and the guy just ordered a 6-foot whip, 12-inch handle, and I really needed to make a video, my tutorial on doing the ferrule and how to install those, how I like to do it. So I actually emailed him and said, hey, man, I need to make a video. How would you feel about having a free ferrule in your whip? I know you didn't order it. And he's like, yeah, definitely. Yeah. So just if you do want to experiment in minor ways, just letting them know, hey, would you mind if I tried something a little different on this? It won't jeopardize the overall strength of the whip or this or that, but something I want to try here. And if they say no, don't do it. But if they say yeah, give it a
that's a good thing to do. That's nice. Yeah. And I would do things like it too. Like if I ever did do something a little out of the norm, and I have a 100% satisfaction guarantee. But if I ever did try something new, we talked about it, I said, hey man, I think I know what you want. I want to try something new. I always have a 100% satisfaction guarantee, but I definitely put it out on that whip, and I say, I tried something new. I haven't tried this. I think it might. I don't know if it'll give the desired effect I want, but let's do it. And if you don't love it, you just crack that thing to your content until I get your replacement out in 1 week. You know, so I'll also give that as a way to get a prototype. I'll be like, I like this. Like, Brian traded some whips to me, some used whips, because he wanted an 8-foot TOD of mine and try it out. And he was talking about he wanted this like a target whip. And so I was like, you know, he's talking about, well, I want an 8-foot, I wanted an Indy, but I want to be able to target with it. So I thought, you know what, I never took an 8-inch snail spike, but then kind of thinned certain things out and tapered away. I make my target whips to see if I could make a target 8-foot Indy. And so I did some things different. I made it a finer point. I even thinned up the fall. And he said it cracked great, but he couldn't volley it worth anything.
Oh, yeah.
And so I said, oh, that's great. You know, send it back to me. But it's like, you know what? Like, I could have just sent him a standard, like, sent him a standard, like a normal standard Indy, like right off the box, bat. And that's what he loves anyway. So it worked out great. He loved it. But the first one didn't. But I also said, hey, man, I'm going to try something different. It's like, if you don't love it, let me know, and I'll get started on the second one. But if I wouldn't have tried that, he said it cracked great on single cracks. Just it didn't seem to want to volley well. But because I did that, even though I now have that and it didn't work out, I make another one, I now know what I did and how that affected a whip and why maybe I will never do that again, or why I would do it in certain situations, or now I know how that affects a whip like that. So it gives you insight to even to experiment and try these different things. Sometimes you find out you have a new product no one's ever made, and sometimes you find out you just gotta go back to the drawing board. But if you don't, you know, fortune follows the brave, or it's like if you don't risk anything, you don't gain anything. If you don't wake up and step out of bed, nothing happens, you know.
Well, now that you guys know that this man has a 100% satisfaction guarantee on his products, where can we go about ordering a whip from Blake Bruning?
I would suggest go to trinitywhipco.com, or you could just Google Trinity Whips, Trinity Blake Bruning. I mean, anything will find, but Trinity Whipco, and you'll find anything of mine. But I have a Facebook page, Trinity Whips, and I have a lot more on there than I ever put on my website. I haven't updated my website too much, but you'll find some good stuff on my website. You know, you can, like I said, you can email me at trinitywhipco@yahoo.com, or feel free to call me at 317-407-0153. And if you're international, please join Facebook. You can message me through Facebook if you want to talk to me, and through Messenger, we can just call, as long as you can speak some English. If not, we'll just translate it through text easily. But any of those ways you can get a hold of me. I'm usually pretty quick to get my phone and respond. I teach in the evenings, Monday through Thursday, so there's like only 3 hours I can't get a hold of someone, and then I'll go over my messages when I walk out of the mat. But other than that, I'm usually pretty quick to answer, or pretty quick to return a call, unless my hands are full of grease in the middle of a braid. There's certain things I'll want to do uninterrupted. Like I want to braid the overlay completely uninterrupted. That is something I try to do, is that I sit down, like, when I'm going to braid this, I will not quit till it's done. Like, I don't want to take a break every 2 or 3 feet and then walk away and do stuff and come back hours later. And that's not just because of what I want to do. There are reasons why if you do a half and half, it'll make a worse whip. And Adam kind of enlightened me on this, although I've noticed it. Like, if you braided a whip to the halfway point, first of all, if you braid a whip and then you tie it off, and then you walk away. Well, let's just say I braided it one day, and now after you braid about 5 feet and tie it off, because it's a 10-footer, you're not pulling as hard on that 5th foot as you were on the 1st foot.
Yeah.
So now I go to sleep, and now I'm refreshed, and I'm not even from the same day of how I was pulling, even though you may just have a general pull. So now when you start, after picking it up, you're going to pull tighter like you did on the first half, and that'll cause that stiff spot in the middle, or that hard spot sometimes, just because that's where you quit. So 2 things to do. 1, braid and overlay in one sitting. 2, and this is what is a good trick. Like, so once I tied it off, don't just undo that hitch and start braiding. Unbraid maybe like 3 inches. So because it's all tightened, like a couple inches back from where your current plat set, maybe a couple inches behind that, everything's stuck in that tight mode with that half hitch. So you want to unravel enough, maybe like 12 or 24 plats, so like a whole set or 2, so that you're back to where it was tighter, because it sat there, and if it did loosen up, it would have loosened up in that last inch or 2. So unbraid a little bit if you did do a half and a half day, and then braid the rest. But that's one reason why you guys might find this really stiff spot in the halfway point, is they braided half, left, went to sleep, got up fully rejuvenated, was pulling like a champ
Yeah.
at a halfway point that wasn't pulled that hard before.
I can definitely see why you choose to do it all in one sitting. It's like somebody gets a 12-foot whip, they roll it out. Oh, the first 3 feet of the way this rolls out, Blake was in a good mood. The next couple of feet, he was mad.
I don't really think the average person would notice it too much unless they really held their whip and looked for it. Like, that's the thing that I never looked for until it was brought to my attention. I'm like, oh, crap. It's like, I never thought of that. And it's like, now when you get a whip, you look for that. Like, I had one whip I sold really cheap because I had the heel foundation and whatever it was, and I think it turned out, what I believe it was, is that it wasn't lashed down good on my core, and everything on that heel foundation was over that core.
Yeah.
And no matter what I did, there was a very slight swivel on the heel knot. And I sold the whip really cheap for that reason, and the guy who has it today still loves it. But I warned him, like, hey, it's not much, but if I squeeze hard and twist, I feel a little movement. And I'm like, I probably wouldn't have noticed it if I didn't have a ridiculous test where I squeezed the whip hard and twist it. But that all happened because it happened to me once. So like one of my check throughs is like, I check this, I check this, I check that. All right, no swivel. So unless you've been exposed to it, you even think to check it. And it probably won't affect the whip overall that much. But like I said, when it talks about like Adam Winrich, where the whip is a complete extension of his hand and thought, he can roll out a whip and notice a lot more. Like if I gave 10 basketballs to Michael Jordan and I said bounce these, he could probably come back after a quick bounce and be like, these 2 are great, these 8 are terrible. These are what you would shoot with because these aren't balanced right or rolling right. And so it'd almost take him like, I couldn't do that. I could take a basketball like, well, I think that needs more air, but he'd be like, no, these are all crap. These are the ones you play the game with. And like that's something Adam could do over me.
Well, Blake, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show, my friend. Let's go work on some whips, man.
That sounds great, man.
Sounds good, brother. Awesome. We'll see you guys later.